we're going to get started with an invocation from Dr. Owen Neese, pastor of Emmaus Baptist Church, and that'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Tanner Walker, representing Cub Scouts, Pack 3599. Please stand as you are able.
Father, I pray that our lives and our meetings would be characterized by love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. God, I pray for the people meeting today that they would have wisdom and humility to deal with so many hard issues that they face. God, that they would have strength and endurance, not to give up, to continue to have hope and press forward. And God, we thank you for your kindness that leads us to repentance. Thank you for the good news of the death and resurrection of Jesus. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor, and thank you, Tanner. All right, I call this meeting of the City Council to order, and we have a few items from Office of the Mayor. First up is item 3A, an appointment of Bruce Davis to serve as a member of the Employee Retirement System Board. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And then item 3B is a resolution approving travel expenses for me to attend the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce intercity visit in Tampa at the end of August. This requires 6 affirmative votes. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes 6-1. And then we have item 3C, a resolution approving travel expenses for me to attend the U.S. Conference of Mayors Fall Leadership Meeting in San Diego, September 7th through 9th.
I'd like to just make some comments about why I will be voting no on this.
Okay.
A few weeks ago, 2 of us were denied travel costs to attend a conference, and our understanding, I don't really know why because no other council members spoke to me about it, but that somehow it is a partisan gathering, and it's curious to me why these other sorts of conferences don't receive the same scrutiny by council and by the public, apparently, who was somehow at that time keeping an eye on what travel expenses were being requested, but in this case are not. Looking at the U.S. Conference of Mayors website, I can see a number of issues that could be deemed quote unquote partisan, including things like immigration. So it's just disappointing that, again, no council members really took the time or care to speak with those of us who are interested in attending this other conference. And I really don't see, a difference in some of these other conferences that get attended by other city officials on taxpayer dollars. And again, as a reminder that the funds that we were requesting actually would be reimbursed to the city, and we were just requesting an upfront coverage of those funds so that we could book all of our travel and things. So thank you.
All right, we need a motion and a second on item 3C. We have that. Cast your votes. Passes 7-1. And item 3D is the public hearing regarding the ordinance change I proposed last meeting, which relates to deleting the requirement for a member of the Urban Design Commission to serve on the Planning Commission. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
They have not. And so we will close the public hearing, and now we advance to items from council. And we have item 4A. This is an ordinance to be introduced and adopted potentially with an emergency. This is declaring a 545-day moratorium on the acceptance of new applications for processing of and issuance of planned unit developments and simplified planned unit developments that would allow construction on or use of property within 660 feet of Lake Hefner Parkway, etc. Councilman Stonecipher.
Thank you. As many of you know, we've been working on our sign code. This kind of emanates from a civil case filed in the Western District of Oklahoma. And as we progress on, we came up with some litigation that involved Hefner Parkway, which I emphasize the term park. And as a result of that, we were able to settle, but some of the settlement language requires that we do certain things. And one of them is to keep into effect this moratorium for a period of time. And so it is necessary that we move this forward so that we comply with the terms of the settlement agreement with the sign company that we settled with in Oklahoma City. So at this time, I'd move for its passage.
All right, this is a motion for passage of the ordinance. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
And then next, I'd move for the emergency, please.
Passes unanimously, and now we would like to see a motion for an emergency. A motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously and with the required supermajority. All right, that is effective
you.
immediately. Thank you. Item 4B is a resolution approving travel expenses for council members Matt Hinkle, Todd Stone, and Mark Stonecipher to attend the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce intercity visit in Tampa, August 24th through 25th.
Again, I'm just going to make some comments. Again, it's interesting to me why this organization is not seen as a partisan organization in our community when it actually does get involved in our local elections and actually spends many thousands of dollars on influencing our local elections. So given, I think, you know, we talk about being nonpartisan, and obviously that definition has been bent to mean talking about issues related to people who are queer in our community, talking about issues related to things like immigration and these other things that we sort of put in these very, in my mind, artificial binary red and blue quote unquote boxes. But this organization, the Chamber of Commerce, actually does influence partisanly our local elections. They choose sides and they put money into influencing those elections in ways that serve their agenda. So I just, and again, is much more costly than any conference that we requested to attend. So I'm just not going to be able to support these going forward unless we actually have a real conversation about where these expenses go, what conversation we're having when we mean partisan, and actually having a real conversation about those issues among council.
All right. We are waiting a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes 7-1 and with the required 6 affirmative votes. Now we can move on to item 5, City Manager reports. And Mr. City Manager.
We have several reports on this morning. The first one is presentation of the law enforcement policy recommendations. And this is a part of our implementation. We have a couple of items on for today that are on the council agenda that we'll reference, but then also that we have others that are moving forward that don't necessarily take council action. So we just wanted to give you an update. So Jason Fairbrush, Assistant City Manager, that has Police Department as one of his assignments, and then Andrea Grayson will give us a presentation. She's our implementation manager, and I really do appreciate what she's doing, working with the police department. You know, when we started this, back up to 2020 when we started this, the idea was we're looking at this in ways we can be better in serving our community, but it's something that's done in partnership with the police department. I appreciate Chief Gorley and his leadership in this and his team. There's so many members that Andre has worked with from the police department that every recommendation that's made, there has people assigned to it that are working on it actively. You'll see as we talk about it today on the potential for the alternative response to mental health, that the fire department will be coming involved in that. So Chief Kelly and his team, appreciate their help with this and their work with us on this. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrea and Jason and let them get us started on the presentation.
All right, well, good morning, Mayor and Council, and thank you for that introduction, City Manager. Again, Jason Fairbrush, Assistant City Manager and Director of the Public Transportation and Parking Department. We are pleased this morning to be able to present you with a City Manager report, providing Council with information and an update about several initiatives that really began with the work of the Law Enforcement Policy Task Force, as well as the Community Policing Work Group. And then, as Council, of course, is aware, from that work, eventually a consultant was selected to really take a look at various law enforcement policies and practices. And that culminated in a report that was received by Council that included really 39 recommendations for the city to consider, again, in the areas of law enforcement policy and practice. And so today, again, we're here to really provide Council with an update about 5 of the 39 recommendations and staff's recommendation in terms of moving forward with those 5 recommendations. The items we have to share with Council this morning, really, I've mentioned 5 recommendations. 2 of them are information items, if you will. 3 of the recommendations will actually, we're asking Council to take action so that we can move forward with those recommendations. The first recommendation, or I'm sorry, the first information item you'll have is a look at the web page that we've designed. It's the public-facing web page, if you will, for all of these recommendations that came out of the consultant report. We're also going to visit with Council a little bit about standing up a crisis intervention advisory group, also a recommendation from the report. And then really the 3 action items that are on the Council agenda is 1, we're going to be requesting that Council considers authorizing the release of a request for proposal for alternative response for those residents that are having behavioral health, mental health issues. We're also going to be asking Council to consider adopting a resolution establishing the Community Public Safety Advisory Board, and we'll get into more details about what that is about. And then we also have the School Resource Officer contract, the contract between the city and Oklahoma City Public Schools for school resource officers on the agenda, again, tied to the recommendations that Council has previously received. So presenting with me today, of course, is Andrea Grayson. She is our subject matter expert on these recommendations and our implementation manager. And before I turn it over to Andrea, though, one of the things that Andrea and I recognized early on working on this this body of work was that, you know, again, as I mentioned, it started with the Law Enforcement Policy Task Force, the Community Policing Group. We had consultants involved, and we tried to figure out, you know, how can we basically brand this body of work so that if we truly are going to weave it into the fabric of our community, that it's easily identifiable, it takes on its own identity, and our residents, council, stakeholders know exactly what we're trying to accomplish with these 39 recommendations. And as such, we've branded the entire initiative or series of recommendations, if you will, as the Oklahoma City or OKC Public Safety Partnership. Certainly don't want to dwell too much on the intricacies of the brand. I'm certainly no branding expert, but one of the things we hope to accomplish with the brand was, 1, convey connectivity. And although the recommendations and the report focused a lot on law enforcement, as we've looked at this as staff and as we've reviewed the recommendations, it does go beyond just the police department, right? I mean, there's a lot of community stakeholders that will be involved. There's multiple city departments, whether it be police, whether it be fire, whether it even be some of the housing, or I should say the homeless initiatives that the planning department is working on. There's a lot of interconnectivity. So we wanted to recognize that And then finally, we wanted to make sure we also recognize diversity, and we think the brand and the image also exemplifies diversity, the diversity that we see in our community, the diversity that we know we have to account for to make this series of recommendations successful. And again, really with the goal of weaving it into the fabric of our community with its own identity. So with that, I'll pause, and again, I'll turn it over to Andrea to take it from here and give council an update, really getting into the details of the 5 items that I mentioned.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Our first information item is the OKC Public Safety Partnership webpage. This recommendation states that we should create an implementation portal that would update the public on the timelines and the progress of the recommendations. Next slide. So we expect this website to go live by the end of the week. And so these are just some snapshots of those live pages. So just to quickly navigate through, when you come to the first page, it'll focus on those 8 areas that the 39 recommendations are sectored into. It'll give you a quick timeline of the progress that we've made from when the initial report was presented to council to currently. And then if any resident can navigate through this webpage, they'd be able to drill down to each of the recommendations. For example, if they were to click on Learn More, they would go to that particular recommendation. And I'm so sorry, I'll get to. So in this recommendation specifically, this is recommendation number 11 that we'll discuss today, in creating a crisis intervention committee. It tells you how far along we've gone, if we're in the initiation phase, planning, implementation, or approaching completion, what our project status is when we started working on this particular project, again, what our status is and what our estimated completion date is. If you drill down a little further, you'll see the project details. We give a little synopsis of the recommendation itself, but the project details, you can drill down and see the entire report as it relates to that particular recommendation. We also provide a way for residents or anyone to give their comments. So I have an email address that they can contact me at, and a dedicated phone line as well, because we still rely on input from the community. We still want this to be a collaborative process. Next slide. Our second information item is the establishment of the Crisis Intervention Advisory Group. This recommendation states that we should consider creating a crisis intervention committee to focus on mental health response citywide to address the ongoing needs of the OKC community. The goals of this group, well, first let me say that the Crisis Intervention Advisory Group will be a multidisciplinary interagency advisory group comprised of individuals and organizations that represent a wide range of disciplines and perspectives that seek to improve encounters between our residents that are experiencing mental health and behavioral health issues and law enforcement. One of their primary goals will be initially to provide guidance in selecting a qualified provider for mobile and mental health response teams. They'll also assist us with monitoring the effectiveness of that selected provider. They will develop an annual report that includes program process on those recommendations. I'm sorry, Tammy, next slide. And they will also foster relationships between mental health and law enforcement communities. We'll also go into examining current 911 protocols and trainings to assist us in better reaction times in regards to this Crisis Intervention Advisory Group. We've currently identified about 20 to 25 individuals. We expect to have those individuals' answers in regards to joining this group by mid-August. This moves us into the first action item, and that's our request for proposals for crisis response. This recommendation discusses a request for information to determine what community resources exist, what capacity we have for an alternative response model. Next slide. We conducted research and decided that we would move forward with the RFP. We're asking for council approval to solicit proposals from qualified organizations for the development and operation of mobile behavioral health crisis response teams for adults and children. Some of the provider requirements in this RFP is regarding to professional licensure and training. All staff must be licensed mental health and behavioral clinicians. They need to be trained in recovery support as well as motivational interviewing and trauma-informed care. The policies and procedures that we require will address basic information such as days and times of operation, criteria for response, program requirements related to safety, service delivery, documentation, data collecting, and reporting. The service delivery portion of our requirements, we just want to ensure that these teams have a manageable workload that will allow for the best application of their expertise, and so the geographic area and operating times need to be intricately outlined. Other really important goals in the RFP will be partnership development. We expect the provider to partner with city public safety departments, the homeless street outreach program, health-related providers, community-based organizations, and this is really important so that they're able to facilitate connections to needed resources. Cultural responsiveness is very important. Our provider that we select really needs to consider providing responders who share lived experiences and identify with the diverse population that they're serving. Linguistic specifications. Our provider must consider providing interpreter services for clients that speak languages other than English, and this is including sign language. In this RFP, we're retaining the right for the city to brand the program itself. Another council action item is the Community Safety Advisory Board. This recommendation states that we should assess the membership design, including who sits on the board, the transparency of their appointments, as well as establishing term limits. The primary duty of this board will be to work in collaboration with public safety, primarily the Oklahoma City Police Department, to provide resident perspective of how sensitive police matters are handled. We expect through this collaboration to provide clarity and understanding through education and communication with this board to the public. This board, if we move forward with this resolution, this board will be established by resolution. It would consist of 8 members that are nominated by a council person from each ward and appointed by the mayor. 1 at-large member appointed by the mayor will serve as the chair. Members have 2-year terms and 4-year term limits. The bylaws will allow for subcommittees. Public meetings. These meetings will take place. They are scheduled, published agendas, all in compliance with the provisions of the Oklahoma Open Meetings Act. This council action to establish the Community Public Safety Advisory Board will allow for other recommendations. There are 3 other recommendations that are attached to the establishment of the Community Public Safety Advisory Board that allow for administrative leadership and assistance. This will allow administrative personnel to manage all of the board's activities and responsibilities. We will also have the opportunity to have a communication plan, a comprehensive education plan. These are 3 other recommendations that hinge on the approval of this resolution. Our next action item is the school resource officer contract. This recommendation states that we should update the current contract with the school district to minimize the role of law enforcement by school resource officers and provide overall clarity. In the current contract that you'll review today, Section 2G states that both parties agree to collaborate to prepare and provide engagement guidelines. However, such guidelines shall be in no way intended to diminish the authority of the Oklahoma City Police Department to determine the appropriate law enforcement response. This language in this contract allows for progress from previous contracts that were only focused on law enforcement. This is focusing on collaborative relationships in the school. So in our engagement guidelines, through this collaboration between the Oklahoma City Public Schools and the police department, these engagement guidelines, just to summarize, we're going to identify the SRO program goals. And the program goals are to ensure a safe learning environment for all children and adults who enter Oklahoma City Public School buildings, to identify and prevent and reduce potential harm, to foster positive school climate based on respect for all, and to be familiar with behavioral health resources and other care providers in the community for student and family resources. We understand, and everyone understands in these engagement guidelines, that we're providing clarity that SROs do not enforce house rules. And the role of SROs in school in keeping the safe environment to learn, we understand that serving as role models is a most important part of their responsibilities. We have models that we have cited that these SROs do provide this role model for kids. Some of our best relationships and some of our officers, we actually do have examples of officers who have become SROs because of their SRO. It was discovered that many absences through contact with SROs and a former truancy program, that many absences were due to students lacking in immediate resources such as food and clothing. That was brought from an SRO relationship, and that's the Youth Enrichment Services program. So they continue to serve as liaisons for community resources. And they also do provide information about rights and responsibilities under the law to students as well as teachers. So these engagement guidelines, again, provide specific direction regarding laws versus school rules. Additional information is data collection and reporting. This will be collected and reported appropriately and legally. This data is not shared. The specialized training that they receive is from the National Association of School Resource Officers, and all SROs are required to attend and complete that training. Their SRO selection process, an Oklahoma City Public School educator will be allowed to participate in the selection process for new school resource officers, with that final selection and assignment being determined by the Oklahoma City Police Department. So what's next for us? As I discussed before, the Public Safety Advisory Board recommendations, the passing of this particular resolution will allow 3 additional recommendations to move forward. Our youth outreach programs, we understand how important those programs are. Engagement with the youth is critical. Any interaction at this point in their lives that they have with police officers really has a long-lasting effect. We understand that mentorship and coaching at this juncture is really important, so we want to move forward with programs that acknowledge and respect the views of our youth. Another program that we're moving forward with is their community partnerships to encourage cultural understanding. So we're developing cultural competence training for the Oklahoma City Police Department that take into account all dimensions of diversity with the input of community stakeholders. And so that's it.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Are there any?
Yeah, okay. Any questions on that item? This will lead into several votes on,
Yes. Yes.
across the agenda. So maybe now's the time to bring up questions while everybody's here and ready. Okay?
Yeah, I have a few questions then if this is the time for that. I think most of my questions relate to the last 2 pieces of your presentation. I think to begin with, since we just sort of stopped on it, and I was asking to get these printed out, I'm not sure they'll be ready in time. Can you explain to me in a little more detail what those engagement guidelines I didn't, when I looked at the, and it might just be because I was looking at it on screen instead of in paper, sometimes I miss things. Are those engagement guidelines detailed out in the contract, or it's just referring, the contract is just referring to those engagement guidelines?
The contract is just referring to those engagement guidelines.
I can expand on that a little bit. So yeah, actually, one of the things we did is we, working with the school district, we wanted to keep the guidelines, if you will, separate from the contract. And really it's for a practical purpose. That is, we have made revisions to the guidelines, trying to keep those guidelines in the spirit of the recommendations that, Andrea had went through. But what we do know is that we may end up having to make some changes mid-year, next year, we don't know. The fact that we developed the perfect set of guidelines very first time out of the gate, probably not going to happen. So we just wanted to have that flexibility for the school, the city to sit down, change those guidelines if needed, without having to take that back to council as a formal part of the contract. Really, it's just looking at flexibility. Now, those guidelines, as Andrea mentioned, we've been collaborating, discussing with the school system. We actually had one of our last meetings last Friday. So we've just kind of come to agreement on those. And we're happy to provide those to council. But again, not being part of the contract and just finalizing them really kind of on Friday, we didn't have them available.
So what opportunities are there for OKCPS to hold us accountable to those guidelines? Say an SRO does not follow one of them in a particular instance. How do we hold them accountable to that action?
So the question is, how does the school district make sure our SROs are doing what we said we would do in the, well.
Specifically as it relates to those guidelines.
Yeah, so, obviously it would start with I'll say complaint or notification to the police department that, there's an issue with an SRO, and then the chief would handle that, or staff would handle that, just as we would, I think, any other.
I think it's a part of the relationship too. It could be just something engaged, like with staff at the school, like the principal at the school, and then SRO officer having a conversation. If it's resolved, then it's addressed. If it needs to escalate, it would go through the police department. It could go through the city manager's office as well, where they could reach out to us to be able to address that.
I guess I just have misgivings that, given the track record of accountability for Oklahoma City police officers, or I should say track record of the lack of accountability, that unless there's like a written mechanism within a written legal document, that the ability for that to sort of be swept under the rug or moved past, that there's just not a lot of opportunity for real accountability based on the current processes that exist, of sort of essentially a handshake agreement on these guidelines is what I'm hearing.
So they're referenced in the agreement to hold us accountable to those, and if we're not following those agreements, that's something that we've got to work out with the school district. I mean, we would have that obligation to work that out in this partnership.
So both parties did actually sign the SRO guidelines. One of the things that I know we spent some time on was the selection process. Now, granted, that doesn't necessarily account for something that's occurred after an SR, but including the school district in actually the selection process when new SROs are brought on, trying to get that administrative or educator input into who would be a good fit, best fit, what are they looking for. I think that's a big step. But at the end of the day, yeah, if there's a complaint, and I think just like with any city staff not doing the job they're supposed to do, then it's handled based on personnel policies and collective bargaining agreements if applicable.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was my next question. It's still a bit concerning to me that OKCPD has the final word on that selection, because again, they can take all the input they want and then still provide someone who is not a good fit, that teachers and or administrators don't feel is, or students is not going to feel is a good fit. So what mechanism is there for the school district, the principal, administrators, whoever it is, to escalate that to a concern that we know that OKCPD will respond in good faith?
Well, to your point, there's nothing in the contract that gives the school district the final say on who that is. But I would just say, practically speaking, if we're going to make this program, the SRO program, but also just the city's relationship with Oklahoma City Public Schools successful, we have to be sensitive. We have to be open to their input. And I know as long as the current group is involved, I would speak for, I think, all of us that we're very committed to doing that. In fact, Mr. Herzer from the school district, I believe is here today. We were communicating even late last evening. So there's no issue of communication as far as I'm concerned. I feel 100% confident there's something going on that we need to know about. We're going to get a call. The chief will get a call, and we'll deal with it. I can't promise for what's going to happen in the future, but that's the current state, in my opinion.
I guess it's a little bit nice to hear that you feel that confident. I do, based on what I've heard about even getting to this point of this contract, I do not feel confident about that. Based on what I have been informed of with the back and forth, things that staff within the school district have requested that were not included in the contract, based on OKCPD pushback, and I'm not quite there. My other sort of question, I mean, looking at these role of SRO in schools, I don't really see anything here that couldn't be accomplished by some other group of people. If you're talking about role models, liaisons for community resources, creating a safe environment to learn, information about rights and responsibilities under the law, I see that can be filled by a number of people that probably would not be paid nearly as much. The contract would probably, if we were contracting, or if the school district were contracting it out rather. So I also, I guess, and this just sort of goes back to my continued over the last whatever years it's been, sense that if this is really what the role is supposed to be, and it's not about enforcing laws, that we don't really need the presence of a uniformed police officer in a school, that these sorts of goals can be accomplished by other types of community resources that, and role models, folks that, my understanding, talking with a lot of youth, they would be a lot more comfortable going to with issues related to, I think my peer has a gun at home and something's escalating, or my peer or myself is worried about safety of someone at home or within the school environment. So I just wanted to sort of, I find this a little interesting that this is where we've gotten, that we're kind of trying to clarify the role of an SRO in schools, and it seems to me if we really needed to get to a place of enforcing the law, that a police officer could just be called to a school if that's the issue. That their presence, especially recognizing the number of specifically OKCPS youth whose parents have had interactions with law enforcement, incarceration, is a very high percentage, and this, to me, having this presence in our schools only compounds the trauma that they experience by having their loved ones taken from them by this system, when all of these things that are being outlined that we're trying to move to appear as though they could be very much filled by other people and other entities in the community. So I just wanted to get those questions out there, and I think that's the only questions I have about this item in particular. The other one is the Public Safety Advisory Board. I think when that item was first, I know we received some briefings on that some time ago, I don't know, 6 or more months. at that time, I think it was being the sort of working title was something like Community Accountability or Community Review Board. Can you detail the sort of process by which we came to Public Safety Advisory Board as the title for this body?
The original title was our Citizens Advisory Board. We did change it to the Community Advisory Board. As far as the Community Public Safety Advisory Board, and taking all of council members' input into account, we were able to come up with that title. Public safety encompasses not only the police department, but fire as well. And we do expect for some public safety concerns to be addressed by fire. So we wanted to make sure to encompass both, fire and police. In researching different municipalities all over the country, we did find that they were moving from saying advisory board to, or police to public safety itself, because that encompasses everything as a whole.
Also, we had this conversation. We're
Yes,
we're playing a game here because we did have this conversation, but I did want to make sure that this is a public conversation as well. Because I did look up, do a Google search of public safety advisory, and I do see other places have that title. In writing, however, those do seem to encompass a lot of other issues that aren't, whereas when I read the objectives of this body, it is really about reviewing complaints, complaints around excessive use of force, incidents of employees that are of public concern, et cetera, recommendations on OKCPD policy. I think my concern with this, and we had this conversation as well, in my mind, there's no room, like this, if this really is, if what is in this resolution of the last be it further resolved, these are the objectives, we don't really need to muddy the waters with getting other public safety involved departments in this. Like that seems like could be a whole separate thing, because specifically what this recommendation was about police abuse of power, reviews related to that abuse of power, and community input to address those things. This seems to, instead of be refining it, again, addressing some of the things that I will say, yes, the membership, the term limits, all that stuff is, those are our recommendations as part of the 21CP consultant. But in some ways, it also feels like there's this opportunity to kind of water down what the actual purpose of the board is and what the public perception of the board is. So I don't see Public Safety Advisory Board as the right title for this, and I guess that's the question is, so if we one day were to roll fire into this, based on this resolution, we'd have to come back and pass another resolution, is what I'm seeing. Does that seem right?
For a different name?
No, to involve fire-related complaints.
I believe the resolution references public safety. No, there's a lot of language referring to police. I believe the resolution also refers to public safety generally. And again, certainly not to disagree, the recommendation is definitely about law enforcement policy practices, the other things you've described. As staff, again, and I know we talked about it, but we were really just trying to think about looking forward. And one of the things we didn't get an opportunity to talk about, but as we're standing up or considering standing up the Crisis Intervention Advisory Group and the Alternative Response for Mental Health, really having that contract and that function reside within the fire department, because it complements obviously their medical response, if you will. Again, we looked at it as staff more from just the standpoint of, there could be something come up in the future with a response that perhaps fire is providing that they're not providing now, that would have to go in front of some type of advisory board for guidance to get that resident perspective. So that was really the main reason for looking at it like that. As far as accountability goes, and whether it's in the name or not, I hope what staff has brought forward to council in terms of the mechanics of how the board will work actually enhances the accountability of the board. Because keep in mind, the Community Public Safety Advisory Board that we're asking council to stand up replaces a previous Citizens Advisory Board. So the language there was similar, not saying that's right or wrong, but similar. And but with this new Public Safety Advisory Board, you know, again, we want to hold, all the meetings will be public. There'll be dedicated staff support so that agendas and minutes and records are all readily available. The other thing we want to accomplish, and the bylaws, if you will, of this board, as Andrea had mentioned, allow for subcommittees. And so some of the really, in my mind, really key things this board is going to have to do is in the areas of education and communication. And so again, thinking about accountability, hopefully one of the things this board will do is educate the community about what this board is all about, how if a resident has an issue with something that happened with law enforcement, how do they go about rectifying that or getting assistance? So that's the education piece, which I think adds to accountability. The other piece is the communications. You know, right or wrong, just the way the process had worked in the past is this was a small group that met and worked closely with the police department. And I don't know how much communication went out to the residents or the community or to council after that. That's one of the, I think, additional items we're trying to bring forward to demonstrate that accountability is we've got to get out and communicate the work of this board to residents, stakeholders, and so forth. So all that said to say is, if the name doesn't capture the name doesn't capture accountability, I hope the bylaws and the intent, the body of work that this board will do, absolutely will bring more accountability to the process.
Well, like I mentioned before, I want to just make sure I was very clear. A lot of this work as part of this revision is really, in my mind, very good about the term limits, like you said, the communication, public meetings, just having a lot more public presence and ability to have that transparency that is, by far a huge improvement. I think my concern is that over the last few years, we've seen the term public safety, we've seen the community, and I've experienced a definite redefining of that term where it's been very narrow as like fire, police, that there have been a lot of events over the last particularly 3 years since 2020 where folks have talked about how do we reimagine, how do we expand our idea of what creates safety in our community. And to me, this is in my mind an attempt to try to claw that back, to reintroduce the idea that policing is public safety and that it must include policing, when really, if this is about, and I hear what you're saying about the bylaws and having that really baked into the sort of structure of it, but as we started with, branding is very important, names are important, and so that's, I think, my concern is that when people hear it, they have an idea of what it might be doing that is very different from what the bylaws say, but how many people actually go read the bylaws, how many people are reading those meeting minutes is very different than when people see that headline about the name of something or sort of that first impression. So again, I do want to commend you both on a lot of work that you've done, and I think there are improvements here, but I have deep concerns about the name selection here and the opportunities it has to sort of obfuscate the work of the board itself. So that's all I have.
Understood.
I have a couple. I want to go to our the book or the report we received for the recommendations, and I'm going to quote page 41, item B on that page, independent law enforcement accountability to the community, in parentheses, again, accountability. If there was one word spoken the most during this engagement, it was accountability. It was also the least defined, but some community members said simply, we want accountability for officer misconduct. So as we look at what is being said, it is very clear that accountability is the word that residents and those who responded in focus groups and the task forces and subcommittees wanted to make sure was said and repeated. And again, clearly it is not as far as this new name is concerned, because of as we look and continue to see when we go through these recommendations, it just seems as if we'll do some things, but we don't, if it doesn't serve what we're doing, we're not gonna just take that recommendation as far as down to the T of what people have been asking for. As I continue to look at the rest of this portion of that recommendation, there was another part of this that I wanted to really emphasize, if I can find it, and it was a portion that said to have representation from groups, and it also talked about a recommendation, here it is, specifically the Civilian Oversight Subcommittee recommended the following. For a total of 13 board members, we suggest a board member from each board and creating 5 positions for special interest groups to include the following: LGBTQ+, civil rights groups, NAACP, ACLU, etc., returning citizens, Native Americans, non-English dominant residents, disabled, veterans, and that process, the RFA process, will gather those nominations for special interest groups, where each council ward nominates its representatives with appointments finalized by our city council. Clearly, that's not here. It also, on another page, talks about a civilian-led type of board. And if you go to where we were, that talked about the specifications, it can't be community-led or civilian-led if we have the mayoral appointee being the chair of this body. So therefore, it already takes away the autonomy for the folks to be able to say themselves who can be the person as chair and how this group will work, how this group will continue to work through the terms, how this group will be led. I don't think, and I know for sure that we're all going to appoint people, well, some of us are going to appoint people that really want to do this work and dig deep into this work, whereas some of us may not. But the point still remains that this can't be a civilian-led body if we're having the chair being appointed. So I just want to re-emphasize that. And as we look at also, while I understand this says 15 members, 13 members, I just find it, in my opinion, unfair to have to choose one person out of my 85,000 residents to serve on this public safety, and public safety should be accountability body. What that looks like, I'm not, again, sure, but for 5 people that would make a quorum to still make that type of decision, and especially, I say that specifically because there are some concerns for some areas where there aren't concerns in others, pertaining to police accountability, pertaining to public safety, pertaining to how we work together with our residents, pertaining to community policing, pertaining to neighborhood policing, however you define it. It doesn't happen everywhere. It happens in certain communities, and we will not have that type of representation to be able to speak to these concerns for those specific communities in relation to this board. So those are really hard things to look at. And even looking at when we had our, so the oversight committee talking about some of the other places, such as a civilian office of police accountability and another name, Police Accountability Commission. It's nothing wrong with being able to call it what it is. And I think that's what the problem is. It clearly says it in here, accountability, quite a few times. And here we are not being able to say accountability is the word as we continue to work through what we are asking for, which is accountability. There's a reason the Department of Justice is here investigating Oklahoma and Oklahoma City. And if we, as we're working with our residents and community, are not able to speak to that accountability of what they're asking for, we're not doing them service. We're not doing justice for the people that have asked us to do this work. And I just go back to every single time I'm with families in communities that I serve that continuously tell me about either a positive or a negative interaction when it comes to what has happened around in their neighborhood, or quite frankly, it's happened on the other side of town, an area that I don't represent. But because of who they are, what they look like, whatever the case may be, they still face these challenges and these obstacles in being able to survive every single day and just drive down the street or the highway. That's a problem. So I know we're gonna be voting on this soon, so I did wanna get that out the way. I'm sure I'll be talking about it again. But it's very hard to ask for things that the community, and we worked over 2 years for, to still get watered down, just as we've had another same effort with the same result. And I would hope that those that like to brag about these things coming to our city and how we're bringing this type of diversity were more a part of the solution instead of just allowing these things to occur.
Excuse me, I have a question. I see our superintendent of schools, Sean McDaniel, sitting out there. Do you have anything you want to add? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're here for a reason, I'm sure, just to see what happens, but I would think the SRO conversation, you would have great insight on that if you have the need or feel the desire. Once again, I don't want to put you on the spot.
It's too late for that. Way too late.
Well, you can just drop the mic and walk away.
I appreciate the opportunity. Council, it's good to see you, Mayor. City Manager Freeman, good to see you all. We are content with the contract. I have appreciated watching the back and forth, the negotiation, if you will. I think both sides had maybe a different perspective on some of the pieces of the contract, whether or not to include some of the operating procedures, the rules of engagement, if you will. But I've really appreciated and respected the process. And standing here today, we are satisfied with the contract. Thank you.
We're going to say
No,
something?
go ahead.
We sure?
Soliciting comments, go ahead.
Okay. I looked at the city's, and this is related to the name, because I do think the name's a problem, and here's why. You already heard Councilwoman Nice cite from the 85-page report from 21CP the results of a year and a half worth of work with residents, asking them what they wanted, right? And so I already heard the word accountability there. But then if you look at our City of OKC's own survey, and you look at page 13, it says 62% of Oklahoma City residents are very supportive of the following: that OKCPD and the City of Oklahoma City should actively begin public education processes that give citizens a clear understanding of how they may make a formal complaint against OKCPD and its employees. So the name of this board needs to reflect that, in my opinion. It needs to be a clear place where residents know when it's time for accountability, when it's time to ask for a complaint, like to note a complaint, they need to be able to very clearly on the website see that language that says, this is where I click. So in my opinion, we have two opportunities there. It's in the name of the board itself that tells residents, this is where you go to talk about police misconduct, accountability, complaints, and heck, as someone who comes from a customer service background, sometimes even some people have nice things to say about you, and they want to tell you the good work you're doing. Those are rare, by the way. Those folk are rare, I can tell you from my Blockbuster and Olive Garden days. But there should be a clear place where people know when they go on that website, this is the board, and this is the link I click. What are we doing toward those efforts? Because if it's not going to be in the name, which I would strongly urge us to do, I've already mentioned this in private with you all, I'd like to bring it to this body. This website we have created, it strikes me there should be a clear button or in the drop-down menu where it says, file a complaint, review and oversight for police misconduct. Or to your point about public safety, by broadening it, since the alternative response to mental health calls is going to find itself under the purview of fire, which is public safety, then I could see where someone might, if let's say for whatever reason, someone involved in the alternative response to mental health calls acts inappropriately, whatever that might be, then there might be a moment where a resident needs to issue a complaint. Or the opposite, when you watch, for instance, the Today Show episode on the Denver Star program, their alternative response to mental health calls, the little 2-minute segment ends with the woman telling them, thank you for the service you are providing. And I think residents should have that place to go to. But it should, in my mind, the website should have a very clear language place that takes them to this body. So those are my two asks. Is it the name of this body itself that is clear to anyone who is trying to seek this sort of, comment and restitution? Or is it on the website, or my preference would be is it on the website that I can go on there and it's just a click of a button that tells me this is where I go to file a complaint, for review, for accountability, or to give a compliment. So I'll just pause there because I don't want to be verbose. I want to be very clear.
So we would agree with that ability, and that's one of those things that once the board is established, then certainly we didn't want to be presumptuous, but once the board is established, then yes, we have to coordinate with the police department, PIM that manages the website, make that readily available. So that's kind of one of those things, as Andrea said, once the board is established, we can make that complaint process, if you will, more accessible, along with really trying to kick off the community outreach, the communication, those other recommendations tied to the work of this board. So thank you for that.
Anything you would add, Andrea?
That's our plan. As far as like with an education subcommittee, when we're moving forward with this particular recommendation and covering the 3 other recommendations, a comprehensive education campaign is one of those other recommendations. And that is part of that education campaign is the complaint process.
And I just can't specify enough, and I'm looking especially at City Manager Freeman here, and I would hope everyone on this body agrees, when 62% of our own residents, and I'm looking right at the language right now, they didn't sugarcoat it. The language is literally 62% of residents support that citizens have a clear understanding of how they may make a formal complaint. And that's the language. It's got to be that on that website. I've had resident after resident reach out to me, how do I make a formal complaint? I've been waiting for this moment for this board to be able to give them that answer. By the way, I can see some eyeballs rolling, and I understand this is an uncomfortable conversation. I understand that. And it must never be an us versus them, that to bring up constructive criticism does not make one anti-law enforcement. It is important to say that aloud. So I've seen it, no tea, no shade to some of the folk. I can see the eyeballs, I can hear the groans. Constructive criticism, and I say this as a writer who has to get those constructive criticisms. Well, I have to get on my own writing where someone revises it, and it hurts to hear sometimes, it's like, but I did a good job, I got us this far. No, we can make things stronger, and in this case, what I'm asking for is to make things clearer. And when our own customer service survey is saying that people, not just a simple majority, but 62%, want to know very clearly how to make a formal complaint. So that language needs to be on that website, even if this board doesn't have that name. But I also want to be clear, the board should have that name. Okay, my next thing, and by the way, the language there, it's accountability, it's the formal complaint, and quite frankly, it's civilian oversight. These are the words. These are the words. Okay. Just two more things. I'll go the more tense one and get that out of the way before I go to the more complimentary one. I'm super sorry to Superintendent McDaniel, who I consider a friend. Quite frankly, I think in a lot of ways, such a stabilizing force for a school district where I used to work. However, when it comes to, and let me also say to Jason and Andrea, I'm very proud of the work you all are doing when it comes to SROs. You have moved us in a much healthier direction as it relates to the presence of law enforcement in our schools, and I think the back and forth is good. However, and I said this during the police budget conversation, I'm gonna repeat it, and I told you all then I was gonna repeat it until I'm no longer in this seat, because I think it is that important. Remember, my background is a film studies person studying media violence and the real causes of real life crime. And so I cite a Politico article once more where researchers looked at what makes mass shootings occur. And I appreciate everyone's patience on this because it is so important that we hear this, we name it, and we work toward it. But let me go ahead and jump to my conclusion here. And the conclusion here, I unfortunately do not believe, based on sound peer-reviewed research, that the presence of law enforcement in our schools are going to create the safe environment. It's not that I think they're gonna make it more dangerous, it's that we have other remedies, and that's where I want to take you here. So here's the real diagnosis of why our mass shootings are happening and why our children are in danger, very clearly. They asked them, can you take us through the profile of mass shooters that emerged from your research? They respond, there's a really consistent pathway. Early childhood trauma seems to be the foundation, whether in the home, sexual assault, parental suicides, extreme bullying. Then you see the build toward hopelessness, despair, isolation, self-loathing, oftentimes rejection from their peers, their friends, their classmates. That in turn becomes a really identifiable crisis point where they are acting differently. And sometimes they even have previous suicide attempts. And what's different, and so I just want to point that out. That's one very important thing. By the way, this research says that these mass shooters, these events are actually, and I apologize ahead of time for the language, but they're suicide attempts. And the research says, I don't think most people realize that these are suicides in addition to homicides. Mass shooters design these to be their final acts. And when you realize this, it completely flips the idea that someone with a gun on the scene is going to deter this. If anything, it's an incentive for these individuals. So hear me again, everybody. That means the presence of law enforcement is the shooter's goal. That's why they have their manifesto that goes on Reddit, so that we hear their pain. It's written pain, and then the pain gets enacted on their classmates' bodies. This isn't my opinion. This is years' worth of peer-reviewed research. And as I say here, it's hard to focus on the suicide because these are horrific homicides, but it's a critical piece because we know so much from the suicide prevention world that can translate here. And here's the other bit that they say. I've heard many references over the last few weeks to monsters and pure evil, but you said this kind of language actually makes things worse. Why? And the response from the research. If we explain this problem as pure evil, or other labels like terrorist attack or hate crime, we feel better because it makes it seem like we have found the motive and solved the puzzle. But we haven't solved anything. We've just explained the problem away. What this really problematic terminology does is prevent us from recognizing that mass shooters are us. This is hard for people to relate to because these individuals have done horrific, monstrous things. But 3 days earlier, that school shooter was somebody's son, grandson, neighbor, colleague, or classmate. We have to recognize them as the troubled human being earlier if we want to intervene before they become the monster. My final thing on the SROs. It's the solution I would recommend rather than the presence of law enforcement, based again on peer-reviewed research. They being the students, we really need resources at institutions like schools. We need to build teams to investigate when kids are in crisis and then link those kids to mental health services. The problem is that in a lot of places, those services are not there. There's no community mental health and no school-based mental health. Schools are the ideal setting because it doesn't require a parent to take you there. A lot of perpetrators are, in fact, from families where the parents are not particularly proactive about mental health appointments. Politico asks, in your book, you say that in an ideal world, this is the solution, by the way, 500,000 psychologists would be employed in schools around the country. If you assume a modest salary of $70,000 a year, which is about what our officers are now making, that amounts to over $35 billion in funding. Now, of course, the city can't do that. That would have to be state and federal working in tandem with us. But that is the answer. And I can't be clearer, and I will repeat it ad nauseum. Our kids deserve access to mental health care in their schools. Sean and his team have made tremendous strides to getting more of that access there. We are building 4 youth centers in MAPS 4 that specify that mental health care access as well. Those are not built. It is mental health. It is suicide intervention. It is even rethinking who the perpetrators of the crime are as people who want to be killed by law enforcement. And until we understand that, until we break preconceived notions of who is committing these acts of violence, the cycle will continue, and our babies will continue to be killed. It will never stop. And I think somewhere along the way, decades ago, parents, teachers, principals, superintendents, and politicians thought if I put a police officer in the school, we're safe, because we saw Westerns growing up. It's just not borne out by the research, and that doesn't make Chief Gorley a bad man. It doesn't make the officers bad people. It means we have to truly rethink how our kids can be safe, how we can prevent the next one. So you all have done, that's why I began, as I now conclude on the SROs, you all have done incredible work to move us to rethinking the role of law enforcement in these schools. Law enforcement should not be in these schools. They should not be in these schools. The future killer wants that. I'm so sorry, it's true. I told my middle school students I would always represent them in this seat, and I would speak to keeping them safe. And this approach does not meet their safety. It's better, it doesn't meet it. I'm happy to sit with anyone who wants to do a deeper dive, because I can already feel some of the tension, some of just not believing me. Not believing me, not believing me. I don't know what I'm gonna have to do. Am I gonna have to cite Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John to really get you? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so I can't support that, and that's gonna be that. The final thing, the good news. Your alternative response is the good news, and I'm very, very proud of what you're up to. And I just wanted to say thank you to Ward 2 voters, and the people who marched in 2020 who asked for this. They asked for the alternative response to mental health calls. My residents did. And they weren't out there screaming, down with the police. Some of them were. But they were asking very specifically that we address the following problem. I just named the problem with the school shootings. Now let me tell you what the problem is with mental health calls, as you might recall. I'm so sorry to remind everybody, someone with a mental health crisis or someone who struggles with mental health is 16 times more likely to find themselves dead during an encounter with law enforcement. Again, not my opinion. I don't want it to be true. I especially don't want it to be true as someone who is clinically diagnosed with anxiety and depression. My odds aren't good. So it's not a statistic I'm comfortable saying, but 16 times more likely. Go Google, or is what some of the internet likes to say, do your own research. You'll see it, 16 times more likely. So by removing, or at least limiting that interaction that law enforcement has with our residents who might be in a mental health crisis, we are mitigating the harm. And we're connecting our people to the services that they might need. If you look at Denver, that actually came up with this before the death of George Floyd. They were already heading in this direction. Just want to quote here. I said I'd give you some good news. I knew there was going to be some tension there, so I wanted to close with the good news, which is, again, I guess there's your Mark and Matthew and stuff, the gospel. Over the first 6 months of their pilot, Denver received more than 2,500 emergency calls that fell into that program's purview. And the STAR team, the name of their team, was able to respond to 748 calls, and not one of them required the assistance of police, and no one was arrested. That's good news. That's good news. As someone reading the Bible for Dummies right now, I'm a little bit more familiar with what the good news is. So this is good news. Commendable work. And I want to thank everyone who was on council in 2020 for voting for the resolution that set in motion the studying of this item. Because I think we're going to get similar results. And it's going to mitigate a lot of harm and decades worth of us not investing in access to the mental health care. Mayor, I aim to understand that right now the Conference of Mayors has identified mental health and homelessness as some of their top priorities in terms of crises, saying that mental health is a crisis facing our cities. And so I see this work, this alternative response to mental health calls, as addressing that crisis. So I'm glad you're there. I want you to share that good news with them, but I need you to bring back to us some of those best practices that can help us. And I want to, thanks to Councilwoman Hammond and Nice for when you did go to Local Progress, because you got to go to Denver and you got to tour this system and see it work for yourself. So, Those are my thoughts. They're lengthy, and I appreciate your listening, everybody. It's just that I've been doing this particular work for 3 years, so I have a lot to say. I have a lot more I'm thinking about, but I'm reining that in. So there we go. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments under city manager reports for this item?
All
We'll
right.
have votes on some of these items later in the meeting.
Yes. Thank you, Jason and Andrea, and thank you, Sean and Brad, for being here and your support and your partnership with the SRO program. Appreciate it. The next thing that we have is we've got a couple more reports that are on. One of those is a sales tax report, and you'll see in the sales tax report, start off with 4.4% growth in sales tax for July, a little over 8% growth for use tax, and so it's a good start to the year. We've gone with a lower projection going into this year with that expectation of things slowing in the economy, and so it's a very good start to the year. When we look at it on a quarterly basis, and I've talked to you about, we look at these on a monthly basis, and sometimes you can get data that's a little bit mixed, or you have anomalies in the data. If you look at it on a quarterly basis, sales tax is growing at 2.2%, and use tax is at 6%. So very good report to start the year, and we'll continue to monitor that. We also have the report on the fireworks call system that was implemented this year, the hotline. We tried it actually working with the fire department. We tried it in January around New Year's, and saw some good effectiveness there. But I think really what we see in this report, and I really appreciate the work of the Action Center with this too and our contractor, but it was a way to divert calls from 911 to the police and to the fire about these issues with illegal fireworks. And so it's a system that's still in works, but I really appreciate the efforts there and the work in the Action Center with all that they do. Shamika Lee is here, and I really appreciate her leadership in the Action Center with what they do being on the front end for taking those calls, not just on issues like this, but anything related to resident issues.
Go ahead, Joe.
I had a quick question about this because I thought this was really interesting. So I assume we still got a lot of calls to 911 related. Did they send folks to the contractor, or did they take those separately that night of?
Do you know, Shamika,
the
on that,
event,
if we
or
had a
the weekend of
911
maybe?
call? If you come to the mic, yeah.
Morning, everyone. They did actually. So if they ever got a call that was non-emergency, they would forward those calls to ARVIC. 911 typically gets thousands, hundreds of calls that are non-emergency. This year they got 30, and they all were emergency calls. So very effective.
Yeah, that's very good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamika. Thank you. And then we have the claims and payroll report, and that's all. Oh, we also have a revenue enforcement report, just some of the work that goes on in the treasurer's office, just give an update on some of the activity that we've had in that program. Really appreciate their efforts too, and that's all that we have.
All right, thank you. Item 6 is Journal of Council Proceedings. We have items A and B we could take with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And item 7, request for uncontested continuances. We have items 11A and 11B that are already printed on the agenda for deferral. What else might you have, Mr. City Manager?
On page 13, item 11G1, under unsecured structures, all of these items will be stricken from the agenda. Item H, 1745 Northeast 19th Street, the owner has secured. Item J, 1910 Northeast 23rd Street, the owner has secured. Item K, 3610 Southwest 40th Street, the owner occupies the property now. Item M is 421 Northwest 86th Street, the owner has secured. And item N, 1068 Southwest 98th Street, the owner has secured. Then continuing on page 13, item 11H1, abandoned buildings. These are the exact same items, so I won't give the reason on this, but the same reasons on these, and all of these will be stricken. Item F, 1745 Northeast 19th Street. Item H, 1910 Northeast 23rd Street. Item I, 3610 Southwest 40th Street. And item K, 421 Northwest 86th Street. And then item L, 1068 Southwest 98th Street. That's all the items that I have.
All right. Okay, item 8 are revocable permits and events. Item 8A is a revocable permit with the Asian District Cultural Association for the Asian Night Market Festival, August 18th through 19th. Has someone signed up to speak? They have not, but it looks like Jenny is here. If you wouldn't mind stating your name and address.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jenny Nguyen. I currently serve as the Vice President of the Asian District Cultural Association. What we do in the community, we bridge and build community across our generations through education, outreach, beautification, and events. Our biggest event of the year is the Asian Night Market Festival. This year, we've decided that we would like to do it across 2 days, so August 18th and August 19th. For those of you who have participated in the festival before, usually it's on the east side. It usually takes up the northbound lane of Classen, Military Park, and then extends all the way over towards Super Cowan going east. This year, we've decided to move it west, closing down both directions of Classen, incorporating all of the businesses on the west side. So Ward 2, James familiar. On the east side, we have a lot of first-generation businesses that just whenever we have the festival, they just close down. They don't really want to participate. They are kind of just like my parents who run Lee's Sandwiches. They've got one way of doing something. They just do it that way. They don't want to do anything new. Don't even ask them. Don't even bring it to them. So after 4 years, we have figured out, like, okay, maybe we should move west, where we have a lot more restaurants on that side willing to participate, and newer restaurants. So people like Tiger Sugar, Mochi Nut, Guac Bao Bakery, lots of places on the left-hand side, 2 ethnic supermarkets that would love to be able to vend, and every year they feel excluded. I know that closing both sides of Classen will require a lot of coordination, and so I am definitely here to hear any sort of input that you guys have, and I'm here to help answer any questions. So send them my way.
Councilman Cooper?
Yes. I'm glad just so always lovely to see you and hear your ideas, of which I almost always support them. So, but you mentioned a question. I do have a question. A few weeks ago, I put a photo up on, I don't know if you know this, like putting Superintendent McDaniel on the spot. I'm gonna put you on the spot, so I'm so sorry.
Okay, I'm actually on the spot.
You're literally at the spot, Jenny. A couple weeks ago, there was a photo that you had tagged me in on Instagram. So everyone who you heard me talk about the new sidewalk on Classen, this is the young mother who took that photo. My question is, why did you tag me that morning, and why did you call it a game changer to see that sidewalk there heading into 30th and Classen?
That neighborhood, I just grew up in that neighborhood because my parents, had their businesses there, but it's never been a neighborhood that people really walk around. It's because the sidewalks are all pretty torn up, or they're overgrown in grass, and that section specifically heading down Classen on that sidewalk, 30th to I don't even know, just to Denton's Framing. It is completely busted up. I don't know how anybody with a wheelchair could get over it, and me pushing a stroller was hard. I couldn't imagine somebody rolling over it with their wheelchair. So for me, it was a game changer because I'm not in a wheelchair, but I push my baby around down the street. I want to feel what it feels like to live in the Asian District and walk it and experience it. But if you can't use the sidewalks, just pushing your baby, I couldn't imagine just trying to get from point A to point B in a wheelchair. So it is a major game changer, even just that little section, because before you would either have to roll over it or just go around it in the grass and then through the gravel that's right before Classen Tag Agency. I don't know how many of you have actually just walked that strip, but it is broken up, and then there's just a bunch of gravel, and I know a few of the transients that live in the district that are in wheelchairs that have to go through that every day. And yeah, it is an absolute game changer. I don't know what else to say. It's smooth concrete. Ugh. That's great. I'm a developer. I love smooth concrete, so
Well, we're working on getting you some smooth trees to line that a little bit.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you, Council, for that work.
No, thank you. And thanks to the voters who have approved that before my time with Better Street, Safer City, I'm just stewarding it and then working to get us more council members. The next time you have that question of why we're putting sidewalks in, on Classen especially, and you say you don't see people walking, please remember the words of our good friend Jenny Nguyen right now. I had to do this because it's one thing to be an elected representative representing folks' voice. It's a whole nother thing to hear the voice of the people. And when you did that, it was the very first thing I woke up to that morning was that image, and you made my summer.
The timing was because I was so early because it's too hot. I would tag you at 9, but I had to tag you at 6 a.m. because it's too hot.
So thank you for that,
thank
because
you.
it feeds into this work where you're closing down this area to draw people's attention to it and to have that walkability and experiencing this gathering. So I would move for approval, and thank you for sharing that experience. You even expanded upon it in ways I wasn't expecting, so thank you.
Hey, James, one question. What time does the event start?
The event starts at 5 p.m. and it ends at 11.
Thank you.
I'm sorry? Both nights.
Councilman Stonecipher, if you and Debbie find yourself heading over there, you just let me know, because I know some of the good places. Okay. Same with you, Councilman Hinkle.
All right, well, we've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jenny. Have a great
Appreciate
event.
it. Thanks.
Okay, item 8B is a revocable permit with the Red Coyote Running and Fitness for Red Coyote Half Marathon on October 22nd, and John Osland is here to speak.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We appreciate the opportunity to appear again. This is the third year for the Red Coyote Running and Fitness Half Marathon. It is the culmination of our fall half marathon training programs for folks that are biannually. We're doing a full and a half marathon training system that we put together for free. It is going to be a change of venue this year. For the past couple of years, we've had it over at the Boathouse District. This year, we're moving to Scissortail Park, and we'll be running down through the upper and lower parks to the river, and along the north side of the river, and back to home. It's also a partnership and culmination of a training program that we work with for Course for Change, who is the partner beneficiary of the event. It's a great mentorship program that we help support for runners who are working with at-risk youth who go through the training program, and this is their final prize-winning event of the afternoon for the fall season. So we appreciate your support, and half marathon training programs start this weekend. If any of you guys are running and have the mind to join us, we'd love to have you out there.
All right, Councilwoman Hammond?
Yeah, sounds excited that you're bringing it towards 6. No shade to River Sport. But yes, I will move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Item 8C is a revocable permit with the Riversport Foundation for the Oklahoma Regatta Festival and Head of the Oklahoma, September 29th through October 1st, and Seth Stevenson is here. And Seth, if you do want to go ahead and speak to item E, feel free to combine your comments.
Mayor, council members, thanks for having me. Again, my name is Seth Stevenson. I'm the Director of National Events for Riversport. And this year we're having our 19th annual Oklahoma Regatta Festival, which includes the Oklahoma City University Head of the Oklahoma races. It's a 3-day event, as Mayor Holt stated. It's September 29th through October 1st. That's Friday through Sunday. Friday will be evening racing, 5 to 10. We'll have corporate night races under the lights. We'll have the OG&E night races with corporations and community partners that are going to paddle and row. And Saturday will be all-day racing starting at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and that goes through 10 o'clock. Both evenings will include fireworks, and we'll have thousands of athletes from all over the nation, as well as, like I said, community partners and corporations. Sunday morning is the Head of the Oklahoma continuing. That starts at the dam, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump from the south end of Scissortail Park. So if you want to come check that out in the morning, they'll be racing 4,000 meters all the way to the First Americans Museum at what is technically normally our start of 2,000 meters. So that's pretty much it. We'll have food trucks throughout the event and lots of other things to come out and check out. We are also applying for the annual fireworks permit, as we do several fireworks shows throughout the year at our events.
All right. Councilwoman Nice?
Yes, this sounds like a very busy weekend for you all, and I think it's very important for folks who are watching to realize and understand the uniqueness of these types of events. We're one of the few or the only in the world to have the night events and
Yep.
have lighting.
Only permanent night racing facility in the world. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's very important for us to note that and tell that story often. So that's why we get these types of events.
Yep.
So congratulations for the 19th annual. Can't wait to celebrate 20. And I love to watch the fireworks hit the river, just the glare on the river. So very excited about that as well. I know it'll be a great event. It'll be a little cooler, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
And I'll move for approval.
All right, we have a motion and a second on item 8C. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then item 8D is a revocable permit with the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation for the OKC More Than Pink Walk on October 21st. And Elisa Pope?
Good morning, Mayor, Council. I'm Elisa Pope. I'm the Director of Development for Susan G. Komen here in Oklahoma City. This year, we will be celebrating 30 years in Oklahoma City. The event is October 21st. We will be at Bicentennial Park. It is a day that we come together with our community, with our survivors, families that have unfortunately lost their loved ones to this disease. But it's a day of celebration. It's a day for our community to see the work that Komen is doing. Our fundraising, our corporate sponsorships last year through the event, we were able to assist 260 people here in Oklahoma City, totaling over $100,000 worth of financial assistance, resources, support, care that they need while they're battling breast cancer. So.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hammond?
Love to see this event back in Ward 6, and I will move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you.
And already alluded to, item 8E, the annual Oklahoma River firework permit. And we could just go ahead and probably take a motion on that unless there's any comments. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, we'll recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority, where we have items A through H we can take with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn OCMFA and convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority, where we have items A through C we could take with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn OCPPA and reconvene as the council. We are at page 4 of your printed agenda, item 9, the consent docket. And there is a scheduled presentation for item BL, and that is it. Is there anything else that a council member wishes to pull out for separate comment or a separate vote?
Yes, I was wanting A, B, as in boy, just more information about that item.
Okay.
BU, again, just more information, and then a separate vote on BV, as in Victor.
Okay.
BV.
Okay, anything else? All right, hearing none, why don't we do the separate vote first? That is item B as in boy, V as in Victor, contractual agreement with I-89. So we can take a motion on that item. A motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes 6-3. And now we'll take everything else in order, which means we will go back to item AB. Councilwoman Hammond.
Yes, this is a commission for some art at Wheeler Park, and I just wanted to hear a little bit more from staff about the process and what got us here, and it's just an exciting development to see this come to fruition, so just wanted to make sure we all get eyes on it and hear more information.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, council members. My name is Leandre Lattimore. I'm the Public Art Project Manager, and we actually have a presentation here that we could pull up for you all. Okay, so what we have here is a 1% for Arts project for Wheeler Park. As you can see here in the first image, it's entitled Celebrating Wheeler Park by Whiteboard Exhibits, LLC. You can move into the next slide. So just to give a little bit of context for those who may not be familiar with Wheeler Park, it sits just north of the Oklahoma River, east of Western Avenue and west of Walker Avenue. So where this art specifically is going to go is for the new concession building that will be located right outside of Edgeling Stadium, which is a softball facility there at the park. As you can see here in the image with the red circle is exactly where the new concession building will go. To the next slide. So what you see here is the artwork that will go on the north and the south wall of it. So it actually consists of two separate murals. Both will be painted on aluminum composite material and will be mechanically attached to the walls. And in addition to that, there will be some components that will be painted directly onto the wall. This process was pretty enjoyable for me as one of my first here at the city. And I enjoyed listening to the proposal from the artist here. And as you can see here in the image, it encompasses a lot of things, both past and present with the Wheeler Park. Touches a lot on the historical aspect. As many of you may be familiar, that Wheeler Park used to be the location of our zoo. And then, of course, how we has it now is the location for a lot of different activities. People go biking, a lot of people gather there to have events, that sort of thing. And then a lot of people, gather to play softball as well, which as you can see here in the image here on the bottom right. So move on to the next slide. So this is a rendering of what it will look like on the actual wall. So as you see, it's a pretty nice size, and of course, it encompasses a lot of detail, and it's a very lively, colorful mural that I think many people will enjoy seeing when they get to visit the new facility. And this is what the second mural will look like on the south wall there. So again, I think it's a very great mural proposal from the Whiteboard Exhibits LLC, and I think it's going to be a fantastic project when it's completed.
Yeah, I love all the color and the different styles. I think it really captures a lot about the history of the park, as well as, like you said, kind of what people use it today for. I know, I think especially the color is so vibrant is really great, because that park that's just kind of, it's just like shoved between I-40, the river, and then Western. And I've talked to lots of families who use it for soccer practice, as well as the softball and baseball fields, and just having that vibrant color, I think, will really add a lot to the experience for families getting to go and enjoy their weekends and evenings there. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I really like the project. As somebody in their private life who deals a lot with graffiti, they make a film that goes over this, that protects it, that's peeled off, and you can put a new film on. Being that close to the public in a dark park at night, I would strongly suggest a graffiti-resistant film that goes over the top of it.
Yes.
Wouldn't add too much to the project for sure.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that there actually will be anti-graffiti protectant that will go on. The artist also has a maintenance plan intact to periodically visit the mural to make sure that there's no graffiti or damage that's been done to it.
Good job.
I just want to say you are suited and booted today.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Lean on them today.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next up would be BL for a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Joanna McSpadden, our Economic Development Manager, will introduce the project, and then we have the developer here that will talk about the project.
Good morning, Joanna McSpadden with the Finance Department. We are excited to bring this project for you today for introduction. We've been working on this for about a year with the Alliance team, Kenton Soodle and Cassie Poor, who's here with us today, and the development team. So this is a project that will change our skyline and bring new energy to Bricktown. The project is located in one of the new TIF districts that was a part of the Downtown Project Plan Amendment that was approved a few months ago. The density and verticality coupled with inflation and higher borrowing costs are going to make this project incredibly difficult and expensive to accomplish. Without substantial help, it won't happen. The proposed package that you have before you today for consideration is to provide 90% of the ad valorem tax generated on a pay-in, pay-out basis over the 25-year life of the TIF, capped at $200 million, as well as a reimbursement of sales and use tax generated just during construction, capped at $5.5 million. The developer plans to apply for Leverage Act funding, which would potentially match that $5.5 million with state funds. With this proposed structure, there's very little risk to the city. While this is a large TIF request, keep in mind that the incentive is entirely funded from taxes generated by the project. They would receive funds only if the project is completed and begins operation. We are not taking on any debt or providing any funding up front. Another note to take into account, the present value of the TIF incentive of $200 million relates to really about $90 million today, which would equate to about 12% of the total project costs. A couple of additional points I want to make about this particular TIF deal. First, how it relates to our agreement with Omni. As you all are aware, we have the agreement with the Omni that restricts incentives for hotels in the no subsidy zone, which this project has a hotel and it lives in that no subsidy zone. You will see in the presentation a total development estimation of over $700 million, but you'll notice in the documents you have today a total of $550 million. That $550 million number is the total less the hotel and related components. We've been very intentional to exclude the hotel from our analysis and from this allocation. The hotel will not be receiving incentive and any assistance at all. Second point to make is you will see in the presentation that the cash-on-cash returns are incredibly low. This is requiring us to work on a structure allowing the TIF incentive to be passed on to a subsequent buyer. So we are working on a mutually beneficial exit strategy that would allow a waterfall concept should the project sell. This would provide the opportunity for the city to share in that upside if there's a sale of the project during the term. This is very similar to how the Skirvin was structured. And I know that council doesn't usually get involved in these contract terms, but we wanted to be very transparent about this difference. We would negotiate if the allocation is approved and bring a contract forward later for your consideration. I will end with that and have Scott Madison and Joanne Carras come up and provide you with additional detail about the project, and then we'll be available for questions afterward.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. My name is Scott Madison, Madison Capital. I'm the sponsor developer of the project. I'm going to give a little background on myself and then have Joanne come up and do the presentation on the numbers. I've been in the real estate business for 43 years, 18 of it as a real estate investment banker with offices around the country, a couple hundred employees. I sold that company about 25 years ago, started developing properties. I've developed properties in California, Colorado, Texas, Florida, and one in Italy over in anyway. So I built high-rise condos, I've built resorts, I've built office buildings, and in Miami, built the largest project in U.S. history, which is 17 million square feet on 10 city blocks. Been in the project for 15 years, we're just winding it down now. So I've extensive background in finance and development, and this 2 million square feet that we're proposing here, we think would be a great addition to the city and to the skyline as mentioned. And I'll let Joanne talk about the numbers.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, Council members, and City Manager. We're really pleased to be here today to present the project and more specifics. I'm going to give you 30 seconds on my background. I've enjoyed my passion, 43 years, predominantly economic development and finance. My career involved public sector service. I've been an elected county official in LA County. I've been with the FDIC for quite some time, tenure, but I think what's most relevant here is the deputy mayor of the city of Los Angeles. I was the one recommending all the money to go to the lower income marginalized communities through the developers that were willing to take the risk to change those communities back to vibrant areas with new housing, jobs. All the projects have been extremely successful over the years, so I pride myself on that and understanding how this process works collaboratively. And you will see we've provided a lot of benefits out of our voluntary willfulness to be part of your community and make sure that everybody feels we're coming in for offering you really great economic benefits. The project itself, which I will go into, it's only 4 acres, but it's 2 million square feet. And I thought maybe it would help you to liken it to your convention center, which is about 500,000 square feet. So this is 4 times the size of your convention center. We're just going vertical instead of horizontal. So we're putting a lot in here. As Joanna mentioned, the investment is over $700 million in total. However, the hotel and some related components are not going to be part of this request. We have over 900 apartment units, and we've provided, again voluntarily, the public parking spaces that are separate from the residential units. They will have their own exclusive access to parking, but in addition, since we're at the Compass parking lot, and I think maybe you know it as the U-Haul or parking lot, surface parking, it's been providing overflow parking for the community for quite some time. They have about 500 spaces. We're putting in 890 public spaces. So we're growing the parking for the Bricktown area. We will be in spirit with Bricktown. We're going to have a variety of dining experiences, rooftop bars, other entertainment venues that are indoor entertainment. We also, as we talked about, we have a Hyatt Dream brand 340-key upscale full-service hotel. And I wanted to point out, we have done our own analysis in your hotel rooms that are underserving your convention center. So you definitely need more hotel rooms to expand your convention business. So this adds more hotel rooms, and it's obviously very close to the convention center. We're providing a workforce development center for the community at large, and then more features that are interactive, digital lagoons, fountain movement, and again, the lagoon with the boardwalk around it is an extension of Bricktown's water features. So we thought to make all of this blend in as if it was planned from the very beginning. This is a map of the location, which again, I think you're familiar with. I think we can pass that unless what we wanted to demonstrate here is some of our local consultants, and in addition to others, but these are more the trades, design, and part of the construction team. So this massing plan gives you an idea if you were to overlay the proposed buildings, because they're about 27 to 28 stories tall, how it would change your skyline. And the top massing plan, if you look at the top left, it has 2 towers. We call those the Twin Towers. And if you look at the deck, that parking is just below them before you get to the entrance level, which is actually where you enter the public parking below. So the public parking will be subterranean. Thank you. And the spot above is the exclusive different entrances for residential parking in the residential units with different amenities. On the other massing plan to the right on the screen, top right, you see the connection between some of the buildings, which we plan to have a pedestrian bridge. While the angle makes it look like it's low, it's actually very high up. I mean, everything could get through it, trucks, and I don't know if it's 8 stories up, but it's up there. But that gives you another overview of some of the amenities and the pedestrian bridge that will connect some of the buildings. And we can go to the next slide. So this is what we call our vision board. At the top left, you will see the project that Scott developed with his partners. He just mentioned it is much larger than this project, but it was a redevelopment of a lot of old parking lots in downtown Miami, so it's a similar setting. And that, I think, finishes after 14 years. They're coming to the end of the phased development. The concept photos that are here, predominantly LA Live, that was built around their stadiums, their NBA stadium, again, creating an entertainment district, interactive destination spot that's worked very well, and as other cities have done the same when they're surrounded in the same situation you have with your sporting events, your convention center. These have identical features. And then the concept photo to the bottom left is just showing you again an example of how we're going to have a pedestrian connection to some of the buildings. This slide shows you our phasing. We are planning to break ground next summer, and the process of building towers this size are going to take a couple years. And we're showing you first phase is we're going for the twin towers with the larger public parking structure and some commercial. And then the next phase, depending on how the leasing goes, will be the second tower, but we're hoping to bring that at the same time. And then the third tower, again, will depend on how the leasing goes, which will bring additional public parking and additional dining. Here we're going to get into the numbers. It's high level. We are showing you that bottom line, I guess, to make it simple. Even with the TIF incentive, the returns in the beginning years are very low. It is typical for projects like this to start off with very low returns. It's a long-term haul investment. Eventually, the numbers improve over time, but we're very bullish on Oklahoma City. We think you have all the core ingredients to match those in LA and other larger cities that have accomplished these developments. So we wanted just to give you an understanding of the need and the gap that the incentives are filling. The next slide shows the investment portion that is receiving the TIF if you approve it. It is not the entire investment. Again, the hotel has been eliminated. It's really the residential and the public parking that needs help. So we show you our capital structure and how we're going to use the money. And we show you our returns at stabilization, which is estimated to be about 3 to 5 years after building. Now, the public benefits that we're excited about is we're creating 1,800 new jobs. 900 or more will be permanent with all the different uses and businesses we're bringing onto the site. 900 and more will be temporary, but they're actually long-term construction and design jobs because this is going to take anywhere from 2 to 6 years to finish. We will have a lot of people employed in the construction trades. We also are providing, through our nonprofit relationship, 132 residential units for workforce housing. That's our definition of workforce housing, so it's based on your need to get back on your feet with the Workforce Center. And we're collaborating with a lot of organizations in the local community and meeting more every day. So we're looking to help people get back on their feet for whatever issue they have where they were unable to sustain a job. The benefit here, because our program is a 2-year program, usually people graduate and then they would exit the housing so we can have other people come in and benefit from the programs we're offering, even though we monitor them off-site. That will translate to 7,000 people getting reemployed, possibly becoming entrepreneurs and creating more jobs. So that's an exciting number for us, for the community. We're doing this, as we call smart growth urban infill. This isn't obviously one of the last properties in that downtown area, Bricktown. So we are designing environmentally green. You have a great transit. I guess, let's say, it's kind of coming into the site with some additional transit expanding over time. We're making the site very walkable, especially with the boardwalk and other features so people can hang out. We've got the EV charging stations at a high number, and again, the benefit of infill housing, because your jobs and your structure, everything you have, your infrastructure is right here. So we're coming back into the downtown. The public parking, as you spoke to, the total is going to be 890 spaces and 2 garages. We're adding more entertainment to go along with the extension of the Bricktown Entertainment District. And for an additional benefit, while our proposal is 90% of the ad valorem over the life of the TIF, the city will be receiving approximately $25 million in the property tax that's retained, and additional sales tax and other taxes like from the hotel occupancy tax. So the city will look at receiving $85 million, and then when the TIF is over, you'll be receiving all the other ad valorem. And we're available for any questions.
Yeah, I do have a few questions. Just, can we go back to that last slide? I just want to get a point of clarification. So that property tax, is that the portion that's retained by the city, is that our millage versus the overall property tax that you would pay? Or is that the overall property tax that you would pay?
That is the balance of the 90% that goes into the TIF. And so that would be retained in the TIF fund and be available for TIF projects.
Okay, so it's not actually property tax that the city receives for those
Right,
other.
that would happen
Right.
in 25 years after the TIF is expired. And just so you know, this TIF is in the downtown project areas or project plan, so the area is the same as TIF 2. It kind of covers the whole downtown area.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that in case anybody watching was confused about that, because I think that's important to make that distinction.
Right.
So the piece about the workforce center and the workforce housing, you said you had spoken with folks locally. Who are some of those organizations or people that are in that space that you've worked with locally so far?
Well, we started with the day shelter. Even though we're not a shelter, we don't function on a daily basis. We are a program. The client or individual that has issues retaining jobs or career, they volunteer, but they sign up, and it's a regimented program for 2 years. And we start with, interesting earlier that you were talking about mental illness. If that's an obstacle, we start with that. We don't just throw them in. Everybody's individually assessed. So it could be a mental illness, it could be a traumatic event, they could have lost a spouse, it could be domestic violence, and now trying to get away, need to get a job. So we're helping the people that have many reasons why they're having a hard time sustaining employment. So we first assess, and then we work the program very designed individually for the individual to succeed, because it's all about, getting back on their feet.
So I didn't
So we
hear-
started with days, so then
Yeah.
the other groups, we're trying to meet, but our schedule is not worked out. I think it's called the Metro, what's it? Metro Tech, thank you, thank you. And the Homeless Alliance, Metro Tech, and then we have, Councilman Neese has given us a list and additional, which we are looking forward to collaborating and meeting. So we've just been starting now. Our founder and chair, Jessica Stanford, is here. She's also met with some of the local tribes, Indian, Native.
Some of our council members aren't familiar with the nonprofit that you're referring to. So will you discuss the nonprofit, the name, and therefore that could give a little more interpretation of what you're talking about, please?
Thank you. The name is Aspiring a New Generation. And as you were talking earlier, that's a very deliberate name, generation, to break the generational, I guess, continuum of trauma and other difficulties in your life challenge. So we focus on a number of factors. We have the nonprofit that provides housing for those that are either unsheltered or chronically homeless. But again, they're volunteering for a program. So the goal is that they succeed and become self-sustaining individuals. Our success rate is very high. I believe it's over 90%. And some go on to become entrepreneurs, and some go on to be successful employees. And some have lost their family, not because they passed away, but because of their behavior, you know, when your children get taken away. So a lot are reunited with their children and so happy that they got themselves back on track. So we do that through workforce development, training, and we also collaborate with other areas like seniors, veterans, the Native American tribes. We do provide service to those groups. But unless I missed anything, our founder has experienced those things in her life, so she's an inspiration to everyone she helps.
So I just kind of want to understand more about this specific part of the project, specifically because I asked about the housing and the workforce as far as partners, but I heard that the employment, the housing is tied to the employment piece.
You mean, no, it's individual.
They're
no,
separate.
Completely separate, but the Workforce Center is a resource that'll be on site, but it's open to the entire community.
Okay.
So the difference is the residents obviously will use it and or use your other resources, because whatever fits best. Plus, we're creating so many new jobs right on site. They could walk, you've got your transit, there's so many jobs in that area to put them, and we've partnered with like our construction company, Hensel Phelps, which is a national, very large construction company. We're gonna be training on-site trades. We've got other companies that are stepping up with technology that are working, and then of course the new businesses are willing to work with our program participants. But the residential is really a housing component that comes with the program, and then the program on-site, anyone who wants to go to the Workforce Center. And we might refer them, it may not be something that we do better, we'll refer them to your other organizations.
Because I do, I think if you've done research about the city, we've been embarking on a lot of housing first related initiatives, and we have people even within the city that are working on a lot of this collaboration. So it feels a little bit like a missed opportunity on the front end of this to have you all be more connected to those people, like our Assistant City Manager, Aubrey McDermott, and Lindsay Cates, who have a lot of those relationships with those folks in the community. So I kind of wanted to understand a little bit more about who you've spoken with so far, as well as kind of how the model works. Is it really fitting in with the city's push to do housing first? And it sounds like I'm hearing that it's there's not a precondition of you have your mental illness fully under, you take your medication every day or whatever. We have some people working with folks to support them in those steps, in whether it's employment or those other things to help them be sustained and successful over time. But it's not, they have to be part of this workforce program to access the housing piece, is I'm
No,
hearing
it's
there's a
housing
separate-
first, like you said, it's housing those in need first. And then the other aspect is, this is gonna take a few years to build, right? So our chair has started already establishing local connections, is looking, after the council meeting, we're going to look for office space, and she's gonna start now. So she starts in, if you will, becoming more familiar with all of the programs, meeting everyone, and being prepared when we do open the space. She will be ingrained in your community and your initiatives. And we coming, from, we're expanding nationwide, but coming from right now, our corporate base is Phoenix, we might be introducing you. So far, everyone we've talked to, they haven't heard of our program, and they're welcoming it, so we might be bringing fresh ideas to the community. I think this is what it looks like from the meetings we've had so far, which is great. We'll just make it even better.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you for considering Oklahoma City. When I think about the creation of 924 new apartments downtown, when I think about the creation of 900 permanent jobs, the transportation that's already in and around this project, 890 new public parking spaces, the workforce housing component, the workforce training component, this will energize Bricktown. This is a wonderful thing for the city. I look forward to working with you all on this, and I hope we have a completion sooner than 2029. And the other thing I would say to my members of the council, I've been doing some due diligence on this. I've looked at the developers' developments in some areas, including Colorado, California, Florida, Texas, and Europe. And there's some incredible projects that have been developed. So thank you for considering Oklahoma City.
Just to piggyback on both comments, I'm welcome. Is it possible to make sure that as you all move through, because I believe there's 2 more meetings related to this, is that right? 1 more? I guess my ask would be that as you're doing your outreach to members, the organizations, the service providers, and I'm glad you're doing that. Assistant City Manager Aubrey McDermott and Lindsay Cates, who are really shepherding the city's very recent Key to Home program. It's our way to reduce chronic homelessness by 75% over the next 2 years. I can see that if you all were having those conversations with them now about who are we connecting from the community to these housing units from the entrance point? And so I think it would really dovetail wonderfully. I mean, we even have another program that kind of comes into this, the Better Way program, this van where we actually go out and we meet people where they are to connect them, to kind of day work, lunch, but then a case manager that can start helping connect them to, workforce opportunities. So I can see that all kind of working together. But for me to feel a bit more comfortable, I think having Aubrey, Assistant City Manager McDermott, and Lindsay Cates with you all, so I think it would save you some legwork. is a big thing. And then I think you're all rowing together at that level. But I guess my 2 concerns, and the reason why I'd like to have them be able to sit with you, is just making sure I better understand who's coming into the program, but then the exiting from, because leaving 2 years at the end of housing where, I'm very familiar with, that transitional housing concept, but 2 years of living someplace can start to feel a bit stable and home. And so what does that transition into more permanent housing look like, and who's helping as a housing navigator, right? That's the terminology into their next step as they go into maybe it's entrepreneurial, as you're saying, or wherever, or reunification of family. So that entry and that exit are kind of touchstones for me, but making sure that you're talking with our key to home stewards, I just think could really, and then as you said, bringing in you all's ideas as well, I think could really create some real good collaboration.
Yes, I appreciate that, Councilman. First, Scott has started meeting with the Assistant City Manager. I'm hoping if I can get on his calendar while I'm here, but he has started those meetings, I think last week you met with him. So we welcome that, and you, like you said, it'll save us a lot of steps. So we will follow through. But yes, it's important that these programs, extend beyond the 2-year comfort, safe home. So we do have case managers, we have behavioral health therapists, we have the whole gambit. We actually, our doctor, medical on our team, his primary station is Oklahoma City, even though he practices in other states. So we already had some boots on the ground from the health, which is appreciated your earlier presentation and the things you're challenging, everybody's challenged with, because that's our focus too. And we have started collaborating with some police departments to avoid incarceration when it's really a mental health issue. So our plan is always to, at least for a year, to have the case manager, even our chair, she gets personally involved with the person's exit and success. So they're not just sent out there by themselves. So for another year, there's constant communication, support, 24-hour phone call if you've got a trauma that occurred and might set you back. So that goes on. Now, hopefully, after that 3rd year, when they're on their own and they become comfortable and safe in their own home and their ability to sustain themselves, they won't need the help. But I don't think Jessica would ever close the door.
We have a whole alumni group.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
She doesn't close any doors. The doors in her own house are open, so it's just what she does.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, I can tell you, this portion of it goes a long way to making me feel more comfortable. I'm a big city guy, so I love density, I love vertical, I love infill, I hate surface level parking, truly with the passion of 1,000 burning suns. So I'm really excited about what you're doing. I was really worried though, because as you know, like many places in the country, we're experiencing a housing crisis. And I've heard from my residents as this project became public news, I heard from many Ward 2 people saying, you're gonna give them money for what? Sky rises and luxury, not luxury apartments, but can I afford, if I'm a teacher or a social worker, to live in something? I saw $2,800 there.
Well, our workforce program, we meet you where you are.
Mm-hmm.
So I think and I'll obviously want to say this again. When you enter the program, depending on where you are in your assessment, you could pay 0 rent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the rent. It's about getting you back on your feet. So with the philanthropic partner we have with Mr. Madison as the developer who, I've been his financial advisor on this project, but somewhere in the process, because we've been working together for years, I became an officer of this nonprofit, another passion of mine. So I had to ask, could you please include us, inclusive, right, in our program? And he said yes. So it's not often that you see this inclusivity where you're helping people. So the rent could be 0. But we've agreed, again, no obligation, but we're voluntarily agreeing, and I know our funding is going to trigger the rent. We will not exceed the HUD low to moderate income AMI. So right now, I was surprised to see that Oklahoma City has a very high average household income. Where that's coming from, I know it's not necessarily here in this district. So the number that you see it's $1,800 for a 2-bedroom per month. That's a HUD number. We just don't want to exceed it. We're choosing not to go past whatever HUD defines as the low to moderate income for workforce housing. So that's 120% above AMI. The other units are going to be higher rent.
So I guess what I'm saying is that your workforce approach makes me more comfortable because I was not comfortable with the market rate stuff.
No, it's not market rate.
I mean, for the separate from the workforce. That's what I mean. That was giving me a lot of heartburn and some of my residents heartburn, but this is a very thoughtful way to mitigate that.
Although, Councilmember, I would point out, though, that
please.
what I'm hearing your concern is, sorry, I thought that was on there. What I'm hearing your concern is that the market rate units are not attainable for a teacher
I
associate.
still have that concern.
Right,
Absolutely.
okay, that's what I was hearing, that I
Yes.
wasn't hearing answered as far as
the-
accessing units outside of this 132 workforce.
So the answer to let's call them the market rate units, our comp is a building very close in the community, the First National Residence. That is the rent they are receiving. Again, your average household income for Oklahoma City it's almost equal to Los Angeles. I'm very, like I said, it's good for you, but not necessarily for the housing costs. But that's what they're achieving, and they're achieving it at an absorption rate that is nationally in line with other cities.
That comp is very troubling news. I don't know, I'd love to see your data because I've definitely seen in terms of our median income closer to 50 and 60. And those are the large majority of people that I knock their doors who are making 50. Our police officers make $60,000 a year. Our teachers are making in the low 40s. So they're not living in First National and they're not living in these new things. So that's where I get the heartburn. So I'm commending you all then for doing this portion of it because that mitigates some of the heartburn. And I think that will go some ways to mitigating it as well, though I don't think that's gonna calm it, but it helps a little. But again, to Councilman Stonecipher's point, it is nice to see this, new vertical structure come to Bricktown, and I would hope that as the urban design review portion of this happens, that these structures, by the way, I'm sorry to say this, Twin Towers, I don't know, that's maybe not what I would do.
It's just a casual way to refer to them, but yeah.
I have a poster in my office of Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and maybe we could think of some other stuff. Anyway, but point being, I think it's good, and this makes me feel better. And if you could, before you all come back, maybe talk with Assistant City Manager Aubrey McDermott and Lindsay, I think that will help you all and make me feel a bit better too. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this topic today? Of course, this is just introduction today. Final vote is August 15th. Okay, thank you all. Councilwoman Hammond, you wanted to speak to BU?
Yes, I had a few questions related to this item because the language of it is a bit confusing, and I think I figured out why. And that is because the memo seems almost exactly word for word from the previous year and the year before that, because it specifically says ODMHS, the Department of Mental Health and Substance Use Service, will create community outreach teams consisting of certified case manager, peer recovery support specialist, and then it goes on to say that the department is essentially covering the cost of a salary and other financial items around a CIT officer. It concerns me a little that something like this would just be copied and pasted year to year without any update of outcomes, where this CIT officer is working in relationship with those community outreach teams that ODMH has apparently created for 7 years that I'm not aware of. So I'm just curious which agencies those teams are out of, because I assume they're contracted agencies and not directly ODMH staff, as well as, yeah, what other outcomes associated with this funding of this position specifically does ODMH ask for? Do we provide them as part of this agreement? It just seems odd to me that we just sort of would keep doing the same thing over and over again, especially as today we have a different RFP for community crisis response that doesn't seem to be in conversation or affected by this, especially I think in the last year with the rollout of 988, this seems like an opportunity to have more information about how that's been going, what, if anything, this position does in relation to that effort. Just kind of very curious to hear just more information about this agreement and kind of what information we're providing to ODMH as far as outcomes, data, and what teams this specific person is working with.
Good morning, Council, City Manager, Mayor, Wade Gorley, Chief of Police. All of those questions that were brought up, the Department of Mental Health would most likely have to answer. What I can answer to is what the Police Department does as part of this. This is the 7th year that we've entered into this agreement with them. It started, and I believe this is when I was a deputy chief, several years ago, and I remember the program initiated with a grant that the Department of Mental Health had. I don't know if it's still funded by a grant or not, but it allowed us to embed a CIT officer with the Department of Mental Health as part of this program to address the most serious, the individuals in our community with the most serious mental health needs that often showed up not only in police-related calls, but in mental health courts, and making sure those folks were meeting the requirements of them, being out in the community. And that's the struggle with mental health and mental illness a lot of times, is how do you make sure that you're helping those people and working with those that need the help the most. And that's how this program started, and we've provided one officer since that time, since the inception. It's Sergeant Lori Osborne. She offices out of the Department of Mental Health facilities, and all of the I guess the data and things that are going with that, and as far as their successes and what they're doing, that is maintained by the Department of Mental Health. Again, it is their program. It started with a grant. I remember that when we initially started it, but I don't know if that's what still funds it. But we just provide the CIT position, and I know they're very pleased with Sergeant Osborne's work over there. We've put out, I think, more than one video to the public where she's talked about what she does and her role in that. But again, it's their program.
So is that information we can get with Department of Mental Health to help us provide? Because I'm assuming that this continues on, the plan with this is it continues on in conjunction with 988 and other efforts that we have out there, that the program, they're intending for it to continue on as it is right now.
If you look at what 988 and the other joint response to do are designed to do, it's to deal with just the day-to-day needs across the community that mental health enters itself into, that oftentimes people have called 911 for. This is a little bit more on the side of, these are folks that have already been identified, that are in the mental health system, that have a propensity to show up time and time again. And this is a specific program that Department of Mental Health targets those individuals to keep those resources within the community from having to deal with them, if that makes sense. So 988, all of the things that we're in the process of doing are going to do nothing but help, but I think they would work in conjunction with this. I don't know that Department of Mental Health would want this program to go away because of who it's targeting. But again, most of those questions would be directed toward them.
Well, so do we provide reports to them in any way on a regular, like I'm seeing that there's some, in the contract language, there is some provisions for reports, records. Do we provide any reports of what this person does to them that we could see?
That person is housed in their offices, and so they're seeing the day-to-day work and providing that feedback. So they're the ones that are putting that information together, not us. I mean, that our officer is assigned to them.
So they don't receive any reports about what they receive out of this agreement from us?
Who's they?
ODMH. And I'm just gonna stop. I don't appreciate the tone. The tone that you're responding to me with it's every time you speak with me, and I.
Why don't we keep it on topic? Do you have any more questions for the chief?
No.
Thank you.
I will say it just does concern me that, again, another underfunded agency like the school district is paying into a city agency that already has a very large budget to provide services that plenty of other people could be providing, and is looking at the salary is paid much more than any case manager or peer recovery support specialist. This person, this one individual might be doing a great job, but it is frustrating to see this over and over again, that we cannot talk about actually addressing the root causes of what is getting these folks in front of law enforcement, in the legal system, and that underfunded agencies like the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse, like education institutions, are giving a city agency that is in theory tasked with enforcing the law, but has gotten itself embedded in all of these other institutions and systems where it really has no business being. And again, I will just point out, I have been spoken to in tones and with disrespect from multiple members of staff when I am asking questions, and from other council members when I'm asking questions that seem to communicate that I am somehow asking a stupid question, I am ill-informed, and it is not the case.
All right, is that it on?
Oh, I'm not done.
Okay.
I was waiting for Councilman Stonecipher to leave because he obviously doesn't care about what I have to say, and specifically pointing out that this is a continued experience that I have, and I am just so over it. I'm so tired of being treated this way because I have different opinions, I have questions that no one else has been willing to ask, and that other members of council don't seem interested in actually having a conversation about until they want to scoff at me when I say something in public. So that's all I have to say on this item. I really didn't mean for this to get combative or for this item. I truly was curious about why do we constantly copy and paste this agreement without any sort of feedback or back and forth about what good this is doing for the department, what good this is doing for the residents and the people served in this program. And that's a critique of the Department of Mental Health. And I think I will point out that I will critique any agency and institution that is not doing well by people and by our residents and the people that are funding these institutions. I'm not afraid to critique that system. It doesn't mean I don't like the person that's in charge of it, the person that's in charge of a program. It means that I'm frustrated with institutions failing people and us doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results. Now I'm finished.
All right, that concludes the items.
Mayor, I'm
Yes.
sorry, or actually, I guess it's more for the city manager. I guess, can we get a report then from, that would be helpful, thank you.
Oh, okay. All right, well, that concludes the items under the consent docket that had been pulled out for separate discussion. We can now adopt the items, save the one that was previously adopted. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 10 is the concurrence docket. We have items A through J we can take with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Now we're at item 11, items requiring separate votes. Item 11A was previously deferred. Item 11B was previously deferred. Item 11C is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval, closing the 15-foot wide east-west alley on Block 58 of Putnam Heights, Second Edition, etc. Councilman Cooper.
Is anyone from staff or anything, or, no? Yeah, you want? Come on up, buddy. Yeah. Hi.
Good morning, Mark Zitzow with Johnson & Associates. Address is 1 East Sheridan Avenue. The request before you is to close a 15-foot wide alley and a portion of street right-of-way that was never constructed. There was an SPUD associated with this project that you all approved earlier this year for a multi-story enclosed storage building. And so right now our plans are on hold until we can vacate this alley and close a portion of the sewer.
Well, thank you for the sequel to that SPUD, and I'll move for approval. It's not me, just so we're very clear. It's
the system. All right, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, item 11D is an ordinance on final hearing. This is the third of 3 meetings on this ordinance change related to health inspections. We've had a presentation, we've had a public hearing. Today is final consideration if that's the council's desire. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item 11E is an ordinance to be introduced, set for public hearing August 15th, final hearing August 29th, relating to streets and sidewalks, and we do have a presentation.
Eric Winger, Eric Winger, our Public Works Director, will give us a presentation on the changes that are proposed in this ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The item that we have before us today is actually an update to the impact fees specific to the streets development fees that are already in place. This is in Chapter 50. The item is going to be an introduction of an update to the current ordinances that's going to allow for credits to be applied for signals that are constructed not specifically at arterial intersections. So to explain a little bit further, when the impact fees were first developed, they were a partnership really between public and private entities to help construct traffic improvements for developments to increase capacity of system roadways. But again, as a part of the partnership, this is supplementing a lot of our bond-funded type projects, which just simply can't keep up and fund all of the work that's necessary citywide. Impact fees have been successful thus far. There's many projects that are completed, several more that are in construction. But one of the things after several years of being in place is the Planning Department has instituted a study that has come back with some recommendations. This recommendation for change to allow for this credit to be applied for developers that request that the signal be credited against the cost of the impact fees move forward. And so with that said, with the introduction today, there would be a public hearing on August 15th. There would be a final on 8/29. The effective date for this change would be September 1st of this year. There's some additional details that are in your memo that will give you just a little bit more background. It is in Chapter 50. It isn't just an update. It's not a complete revision to the entire ordinance. And again, it's supported by developers of Oklahoma City. I can answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah. I'm sorry. So I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. So this amendment to the existing impact fees will provide credits for when the developer, do a signal?
Right, so to be even more plain, there's many cases where a new development goes in and a signal might be requested by a developer. However, if it's not a signal that's already been identified in one of the engineering impact fee studies, it's not one that the city can assist in constructing. What this change would do is make that an opportunity for a developer to seek and make the request to have the developer construct the signal in lieu of paying a portion or all of their fee. It would never be a fee that could be used for less than the fee, but obviously if the signal costs more than the fee, they would simply build that signal at its full cost, and no credits applied to any other development after that. So financially, it would be a benefit to the city knowing that these signals also have to be warranted. The signals that the developers construct also have to increase capacity by adding a lane addition. It can be a left turn, a right turn, or a through lane. So there are some very specific requirements for these. It's not just placing a signal for convenience. It actually still increases the capacity of the traffic system.
And the Traffic Commission looks at that and does a study to determine, I mean, I guess, yeah, does Traffic Commission review all this alongside you all?
Yes, so the same requirements for traffic signals constructed in Oklahoma City, they still have to go to the Traffic Commission and be approved before they're constructed. In this case, they'll have to be approved by the commission, but they'll also have to come with a turn lane addition to meet the requirements of the impact fees. So a signal alone does not meet the full requirements for impact, being that it increases the system capacity. Adding the turn lane or a through lane does. So it'll be a signal and lanes reviewed by the Traffic Commission. It's also requested by the developer. It's not required by the city that the developers do this.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. It really simply just adds some additional options to our existing ordinance just for more flexibility. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that item can be introduced today if that is the council's desire. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, item 11F, 1 is the public hearing regarding the dilapidated structures here listed. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
And so we'll advance to F2.
I do have a question.
Sure.
I'm looking at item D, and I realized that we were able to strike it from item G and item H from our abandoned and unsecured. So I'm just curious as to our dilapidated, where we are with that.
Chad Davidson, Code Enforcement Superintendent. Building still has a considerable hole in the roof, and that's the reason we've decided to leave it on with the dilapidated structure. It has been secured, from what I understand, and that's the reason we've asked to have it stricken from the unsecured docket.
All right. If we're no more comments on the items, then we can proceed to the resolution at F2 declaring that the structures are dilapidated. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11G1 is the public hearing regarding the unsecured structures here listed, except for those previously struck. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
So we can proceed to the resolution found at G2 declaring the structures unsecured. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11H is the public hearing, 11H1 is the public hearing regarding the abandoned buildings here listed except for those previously struck. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
They have not.
They have not, and so we will proceed to the resolution found at 11H2 declaring that the buildings are abandoned. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11I is the previously referenced resolution establishing a mayor-appointed Community Public Safety Advisory Board to provide independent law enforcement accountability to the community as recommended by the Law Enforcement Policy Task Force and the Community Policing Working Group. I don't know if there's any other comments or questions that any council members have on this? If not,
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Website. I meant what I said earlier, that language in terms of being where it's clear to residents about filing a complaint, saying good job, but just some sort of clarity there is kind of tantamount. So I wanted to just bring that up now. Okay, thanks. Oh, and then we'll start, will there be, what's the formal process now look like for all of us as council members?
We'll reach out to you, similar to what we did with the Human Rights Commission, and get your recommendations for the appointments.
And then didn't you all send us once like a checklist of or I feel like there was some sort of information that came to us about.
I know there was some information that was provided, and I think we just got ahead of it before getting everything established. And so now we'll go back and just reinitiate that, say this was started before, and I know some of you already started conversations.
Okay.
We wanted to make sure we had it in place before we took that step.
I waited till this moment. Go ahead.
Excellent.
Councilwoman.
And that'll have the requirements for the position as well, because it's different than some of our other boards, trusts, and commissions about who can and who cannot serve on that commission.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I would like to make a motion, as we talked about before, concerns about the name and about better helping the community understand what the purpose of the board is. So I think my motion essentially is to, wherever Community Public Safety Advisory Board is listed in the resolution, to strike that and replace it with Community Review and Accountability Board. Open to other suggestions or conversations, you know, if maybe it's worth deferring this to have that conversation in more depth across council and staff, but that'll be my motion for the time being unless there's other recommendations on that.
And I just want to clarify, did you say Community Review and Accountability Board?
Correct, yes.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion on the table to amend the resolution to replace every instance of Community Public Safety Advisory Board with Community Review and Accountability Board.
Is there an opportunity to defer this resolution as we work through some of what those conversations could be?
Can you remind me if we currently have a motion to amend on the table? If someone wants to make a motion to defer the original item, is that a precedent motion? Or do we need to dispose of the amendment first?
City clerk is nodding her head yes to.
Okay, so is there a precedent motion? Are you wishing to make a precedent motion to defer the item 11I?
Yes, I will ask that we defer this for a couple weeks. There's some more work that needs to be done as far as our conversations with this, and I'm actually hoping, Mayor, that you will confer with some of us that have these concerns, especially with the fact that you will be, this resolution also says that you're going to be appointing the person that's supposed to be the chair of this body. So in my opinion, I would like for us to just have a little deeper discussion instead of the one we have not had yet.
Okay, so we have a motion, maybe we need to pull that up now. A motion to defer the item 2 weeks. There's a motion and a okay, going once, going twice. Motion fails for lack of a second.
No, it's not coming up
Oh,
on
okay.
our screen.
We need to reload. All right, are we just stuck? Do we want to do verbal?
I'll second.
Okay, so, well, need something.
Back where we were. Oh, there we go.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes on the deferral. Deferral motion fails 3-5. Councilwoman Hammond, do you wish to return to your amendment motion?
Yes, please.
Okay. So again, this is a motion to amend 11I to change the name in all instances it appears in the resolution from Community Public Safety Advisory Board to Community Review and Accountability Board. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, cast your votes when you are able. Motion fails 3-5. We are now back on the resolution found at 11I. Are there any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we could entertain a motion.
I got quite a few.
Okay.
And I'm gonna leave it at this. It's very unfortunate that even as the leader of this body and working with the council members, that we can't even get our own mayor to work with us and talk through some of these things that we're asking for. And that speaks to even our residents who also can't get this accountability that they have asked for and have needed for the last few years for us even working through this particular conversation and all of these recommendations and going through this work of volunteer hours that people have asked for representation that they still are unable to receive. It's very disappointing, again, that we have to continue to go through these efforts of people not being able to be heard and to be represented at the table for specific conversations for those same groups that have experienced the trauma of what has been brought forward by the lack of the accountability that they have asked for. And, you know, I hope everyone that is watching this looks and understands how our mayor feels about that part of representation for individuals that have been faced with these types of consequences and not having that accountability for themselves or for their family members. It is very disappointing that we have to have these types of votes and the lack of conversation from our mayor to be able to speak to these concerns to our residents. And we, as the representatives of those specific wards, have to go back and tell the people the stories of what has just happened, what has taken place, and the fact that, well, I tried, but you should be talking to the mayor to see why he doesn't feel the same way that I do about how we represent you in these efforts. So we can move forward with that vote now.
And just to clarify, if this were a mayor-introduced resolution, it would have appeared under office of the mayor. This is not my resolution. This is staff recommendation based on
You just voted
task
on it.
force policy.
You just voted on it.
All right.
I did too. I must admit, I did
Right,
too vote on
right.
it.
I think
Thank
we
you.
all have one vote up here. Okay, are there any
As the
other
leader
discussion?
of this, as the interpreted person and presiding officer of this body, but also the representative for our city, in the face of our city, and the fact, again, of you being the representative of police, public safety across the nation for the Conference of Mayors, yes, you do represent these conversations, and you are accountable for the people who have asked for these accountability conversations and the word accountability that shows up in this recommendation as far as the city of Oklahoma City.
Absolutely, accountable every 4 years. All right,
70% approval.
any other discussion or comments? We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes for Resolution 11I. Passes 6-2. All right, we'll now proceed. Oh, I did want to say, so this is creating a new board. By the way, in a previous vote, we retired a board, so one in, one out. That was under the health inspection resolution. We retired the Board of Governors for nursery something. So this is creating a new board. 8 of the 9, as previously reported, are ward-specific, ward representatives, and as following the custom that I have certainly engaged in and following the custom of predecessors, I will generally rely upon, if not exclusively rely upon, the recommendations of the council members for those positions. And I don't want to set a hard and fast deadline by any means, but I would hope that perhaps in a month or so, council members could present their recommendations, and then we could proceed with bringing all of those forward to the council docket for approval. And if we don't hear from somebody, I'm sure we'll ping Debbie or somebody else in the council office to check in and see if progress is underway. And I look forward to receiving those and then bringing them forward for consideration by the whole body. And I think, this has come up in the past, so we're saying every council member is really, free to engage in whatever process they wish to utilize, because it is sort of 9 different processes. And if they wish to use their social media or their own networks or even our PIM office to seek applicants or interest, or maybe they already have somebody in mind, but I really think it's impossible when you have kind of 9 different people making the decision for all of us to use the same process. But certainly there's nothing stopping anyone on the council from soliciting interest in any which way that they would like to. And I certainly encourage them to utilize whatever methods they wish. All right, 11J1 is a resolution authorizing the municipal council to confess judgment without admitting liability in the case of Pettigrew v. City of OKC. Staff has not requested executive session. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11K is a motion to enter into executive session on advice of the municipal councilor to receive confidential communications regarding the case of Waddell for Jones v. City of OKC. So we just need a motion to go into executive session. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We will handle that at the conclusion of our other business. Item 11L, claims recommended for denial. We have items 1A through G. Executive session is not requested. We can take them with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11M, 1 is a claim recommended for approval. Executive session is not requested. M1A, take a motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. That concludes votes for the day, but we're at item 12, comments from council. Ward 1.
Just one thing today, Mayor. I just wanted to send out a big congratulations to Miss Marilyn Long of the Northeast Resource Center. Last night she was awarded the Outstanding Community Service Dignitary Award. She has been serving her community over there for numerous years. I had the honor of getting to meet her and serve alongside her a little bit this year. If you feel like looking her up or going over and helping serve, she's at 1415 Northeast 23rd Street. She would definitely need and love to see you and have your help. So thank you very much. And congratulations to Ms. Long.
It happened in the interim, but Councilwoman Hammond wanted to say publicly happy birthday, and thank you for just your work, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Ward 4.
I just wanted to real quickly acknowledge the passing of David McLaughlin, Tim McLaughlin's father. Just a really nice man. Got to meet and hang out with him a few times at different events. I think what was notable about the events was every event had to do with making our city a better place and a better place for its citizens. So I just wanted to say thoughts and prayers are out there with the McLaughlin family. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward 5.
It's a sad week for Oklahoma City. We lost another great Southsider, and Gary Rankin laid him to rest this week. He did great work at OCCC and was actually the planning commissioner for Ward 5 prior to me, so prayers with his family as well.
Thank you. Ward 6.
Yeah, I would like to just make mention of the news that was published on Friday that the DA will not be pursuing charges for multiple police officers who took the lives of residents of our city. And I just wanted to make space and say their names and let the community know that it is disappointing that for all the talk about accountability for people that are in our jail or have committed some other crime, that same level of accountability never seems to be presented for the same level of scrutiny for people who have been given the ability to take people's lives legally. So I just want to make space for Benny Edwards and Stavian Rodriguez.
Thank you. Ward 7.
I'll also reference what was just said and speak their names as well, Stavian Rodriguez and Benny Edwards. And it's very unfortunate when, again, you ask for accountability and the people have spoken for accountability with pages and pages of, and you still can't get that. So I hope people realize and acknowledge and understand that just because you come to the East Side and get a burger and post about it, if you're not creating policy that helps these folks or this community, you're not doing justice to the people that you're going to buy a hamburger for or from or buy breakfast from. You're not doing any justice. So it's very unfortunate, again, that we have this type of system, especially the fact that we have a mayor that doesn't even want to have that specific conversation about what it could look like for folks to just table it for a couple weeks to talk through it and come to a better understanding and acknowledgement for the people that we're serving. So this is a sad day for accountability as far as this particular oversight board could have done for our residents within Oklahoma City. I also want to speak the name of Joaquin Oliver. His parents were here on Sunday. This was a young man that was murdered in the Parkland, Florida, Marjorie High School shooting. His family was here fighting gun violence one stop at a time, and Oklahoma City was one of those stops. So to hear their story and for them to continue to carry the legacy of their son across this country, they'll be going to more cities. I know after they left us on Sunday afternoon, they were headed to Tulsa, and I know they're making their way to the West Coast right now. So our thoughts are definitely with them as they continue to carry the legacy in the words and the mission of their son, so he will not go in vain as far as his memory is concerned, nor the other young people that were taken away from that devastating day in 2018. I do want to say thank you to the Mexican consulate. I was able to take a tour and visit and understand the work that they're doing, and it is some amazing work. And if you did not know, about over 260 some odd passports are issued every single day there for our residents. And that is just amazing to see the work that they're doing and how they are able to compete on the same level. I wouldn't say really compete, but just work on the same level as a city such as Dallas, and still be able to kick out as many and be so effective in the things that they're doing. So very, very in awe of that place, and I look forward to them being able to serve more and more and more as the years continue to evolve. A couple other things I do want to mention: Live Free OKC. Since we can't get accountability from our city, we have a violence interruption program that's going to start so we can take care of ourselves, and that's going to kick off on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Saturday there will be a Peace Expo that will happen from 11 to 1, and there will also be a couple of things, stakeholder meeting on August the 3rd and August the 4th. So if you are able, I'll be posting that on my Facebook page for you to come in and listen to hear more. Also, the River Bowl is happening in a couple weeks, next Saturday. I guess it is August the 12th. It's for us to be able to celebrate our historically African-American alumni of our historic schools within Oklahoma City from 6 to 10, and also pickleball. If you are a fan of pickleball, chicken and pickle, the Sigma Omega Foundation of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, they'll be having a pickleball tournament this weekend. And also want to say thank you to all of the community members for this past weekend. There were so many backpack giveaways within the community to help serve all of our residents and those that don't live within our community as well. But just being able to provide a need, but coming over to receive that need is always what it's about for our communities. And last one, for the parks conversation that happened last week, I'm going to be posting, it was recorded, I will be posting that so people can still take the survey pertaining to a couple of our Northeast parks, and want to say thank you to Kimley Horn and the folks that were there that did record that, to make sure that we have some type of representation for those who were unable to attend due to other commitments, including myself. I was at the Oklahoma History Center for Career Day, so that was pretty fun to just be among some and represent our city and talk about some things and being in government. So that was a lot of fun. But I will post that, and I plan on taking that survey, so I hope everyone else will as well that missed out.
All right. We're now at item 13, citizens to be heard, and we have 3 who signed up, but I think 2 who are only remaining. Joy Reardon signed up, but is not in the room. Michael Washington?
Thank you. Michael Washington, 3520 Northwest with a 51 on the back. I won't comment on what y'all did today other than what these 2 ladies just mentioned. It's almost as if you looked into my dreams and stole the point I wish to express to y'all today, this morning. Now then, Vicky B. Henner, whatever damn stupid name you is, lady, listen at me if you watching, because you got one nigga that ain't scared of you. Now then, that's right, you know Michael gonna speak here. To hell with you, your sorry ass lady. Who in the hell are you? You're gonna tell the whole world to hell with an innocent black man who's mentally running away that we got goddamn officers, we gonna shoot your goddamn ass. That's right, you heard what I said. Listen at me good. Don't give a damn about whose ears listening. Oh well, this is a sensitivity moment today. You'll get a learn of education. Now then, we're gonna shoot a 15-year-old kid, Stavian Rodriguez. You tell the youngster to drop whatever weapon he's got, he drops it as if going into his back pocket. Maybe something else is there. And then you gun him down and it ain't not his pocket good? Well, come on now. What kind of accountability is this? I don't have much time. That's the only reason why I'm spending as I'm going nowhere fast. That's the only reason, because I don't have time to really say what I need to say. But let me say this here in a more calm, cool, collective manner. I've done my own investigation against you, Vicky B. Henner, B. Tenner, Zendena, whatever your damn name is. That's right, not scared of you, and what? Now then. Yes, I discovered that you are no stranger to murderers getting off scot-free. That's right, I'm gonna do a history on your stupid ass son while I'm here. That stupid, no good maggot, so-called fake ass lieutenant in the military. Really? God damn it, take them file a lawsuit on me. That's what you do, idiot. Now then. That's right, boy, Michael wasn't gonna be nice, we know that, don't you? Vicky B. Henner has a son, Michael B. Henner, a former United States Army First Lieutenant who was convicted of 2008 murder of Ali Mansour Muhammad during the occupation of Iraq. B. Henner was sentenced to 25 years imprisonment. However, his sentence was commuted to 15 years. Thanks to President Donald Trump, Michael B. Henner was granted a full pardon. This woman used her political connections to get her son the full pardon. She knew that she couldn't allow the stain of her son being a convicted murderer to put a wrinkle in their family's deep and well-established ties
30
to
seconds,
law enforcement
please.
and law and the legal system here in Oklahoma. He was released on parole in 2014. B. Henner, you are unfit as a district attorney. You are patsy for the Fraternal Order of Police who control the dreadful decision that prompted you to reach the decision you reached. Let me say to you, because my time has expired, that's the only reason for saying this, ending it here, like sand in an hourglass. So are the days of you being a district attorney here in the state of Oklahoma. Bye, lady. See you later on. I'll start a vista, baby, because Michael B.
Ronnie Kirk.
Now you ready to shoot me down? I'm coming now. I got my hand there. Let's make it different. I'm sorry. My name is Ronnie Kirk. My address, 2328 North Missouri. Mr. Cooper, I'd like to thank you for taking your time to explain about the LGBTQ. We both went through some type of discrimination throughout the years. In that article I given, in 92, I gave Ron North a copy of the letter y'all have today. But I ain't finna talk about that because the letter explains itself. You know, in the last month, we've had 4 public notices. You haven't seen one of them since then because they gave these public notices at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. It said Oklahoma was one of the #1 distributors of marijuana in the United States. 1 week after that, Skittles came out with a chewable gummy bear with marijuana. A week after that, they come out with a chewable gummy for your sex drive. A week after that, another notice came out. So y'all were probably asleep during this time. Nobody has seen these notices. They never showed them no more, but they already approved them. And a week after that, you know, they got a chemically induced beef that's going on the market. Last week,
30 seconds,
there's a
please.
drink called Prime. They just said they're gonna issue a notice for them not to sell the Prime drink. It's an energy drink to kids. So it's been on the market for 2 years. Prime means priming your body for these things. You know, nobody has even said how many kids have died from eating these chewable. It's
Mr. Kirk.
candy. They don't know the difference
Mr. Kirk,
between
we're over
drugs and marijuana.
We're over time. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, we do have an executive session, and we will return.
Or is it niece?
Good. All right, good deal. See you later. Okay.
All right, we are back, and we have concluded our business, which brings us to item 14, adjournment, and we are adjourned.